Chapter 3929. Sure enough, after several rounds of bidding, it was the turn of a formation diagram called the 13 Buddhist Clouds Formation. The Buddhist formations of the Buddhist sect were naturally not as good as the relics of the Buddhist sect. The monster race was not interested in it, and there were not many humans who understood formations, so the previous bidding was relatively quiet. When it came to this formation diagram, no one bid, even though Xian Kong's bid was only 200,000 sea crystals. Seeing that Xian Kong was about to change the Buddhist formation to a Buddhist formation, Xiaohua suddenly smiled and said, "Fellow immortal Xian, the things in your Yazi auction house today have really opened this old man's eyes. This old man has gained a lot from you. How about this? Since no one is bidding for this Buddhist formation, this scene is too awkward. This old man will join in the fun and bid for this Buddhist formation." "Thank you, fellow immortal." Xian Kong was stunned for a moment, then he smiled and the strange expression in his eyes became even stronger. Xiaohua's move was really, everyone knows what Sima Zhao is thinking. Not to mention the humans, even the monster race who never used their brains to speak and do things could see Xiaohua's thoughts. Needless to say, all the monster race naturally looked at Xiaohua in an instant. This fellow immortal is starting to get closer to fellow immortal Xian? The corners of that person's mouth rose slightly and he said indifferently, "In that case, this old man can't be left behind. This old man bids 210,000 sea crystals." "Fellow immortal, aren't you being too obvious?" Xiaohua muttered unwillingly. "This old man bids 300,000. 310,000, 400,000, 410,000, 500,000. As Xiaohua and that person bid one price after another, the heads of all the monster race and human race in the entire auction field nodded left and right like little chicks. The rhythm was uniform and quite orderly. 510,000, 600, 000, 610,000. Seeing that person being so aggressive, Xiaohua was also very anxious. His tone was very angry and his whole body stood up from the chair. The speed of his bidding also increased. 900,000, 910,000, 1 million, 1,010,000. After that person finished announcing the price, all the humans and demons looked at Xiaohua's figure. Then, as usual, they paused at Xiaohua's position and turned to look at that person. That person also shouted, "What? 11 million. However, just as everyone and the demons turned to look at Xiaohua again, they suddenly came to a realization. Xiaohua wasn't bidding. The crowd of demons and humans came to their senses, and so did the man himself. An extremely bad feeling rose from the bottom of the man's heart. He almost said angrily, "You? Why didn't you bid? Why should this old man bid?" Xiaohua replied casually, "This old man can't outbid you, so I can only give you this incomparably precious Buddha array." "Why aren't you?" That person was at a loss for words. He almost stuttered as he asked, but he couldn't finish his sentence. Xiaohua said with a smile, "What? Are you still waiting for this old man to say something?" Without waiting for that person to speak, the nearby demons all nodded, agreeing with Xiaohua's opinion. Didn't this old man say it already? There can only be 1 and 2 times, but not 3 and 4 times. Xiaohua said very innocently, "This old man has said so many times, how can I say it again?" That person almost vomited blood when he heard this, because Xiaohua had to say, "How many millions of sea crystals is this old man going to bid at the end? If you raise the price again, then this old man will have to fulfill your wish." In order to end it, he took it for granted that Xiaohua would say it this time, so he didn't even consider bidding with Xiaohua. Of course, Xiaohua's bidding speed was also extremely fast. Even if he sensed it in his heart, he didn't react. Who would have thought that Xiaohua would suddenly stop bidding? Not to mention him, even the crowd of demons who were watching the show didn't have any reaction. They even used their gazes to urge him to bid. The demons understood, and they all laughed loudly. The atmosphere of the entire Yazi auction house suddenly reached its peak. Unfortunately, this peak wasn't brought to them by bidding. It was purely formed by the invisible battle between the bidders. Xian Kong also couldn't help but cover his mouth and laugh. A Buddhist formation of 200,000 sea crystals was bid for 1,010,000, which was 5 times the previous price. Oh, it should be 1,010,000 for no reason, because Xian Kong could see that Xiaohua had no intention of bidding for this Buddhist formation. In fact, it was destined that no one would bid for this Buddhist formation. 1,010,000 sea crystals might not be much to that person, but the anger in his chest was really choking. At this time, Xiaohua opened his mouth again. Fellow immortals, I wonder if you have raised chickens when you were young? We don't have any. Some of the more outspoken demons were puzzled. What's a chicken? 2 of the humans asked. Fellow Taoist, we did eat chicken when we were young, but we've never raised a chicken before. Xiaohua nodded and said with a very serious expression, when this old man was young, he lived in a village and raised a few chickens at home. This old man was responsible for feeding them grass. When the demons heard Xiaohua's serious tone, they naturally listened attentively. Every time this old man fed the chickens, he would use chopsticks to knock on the broken bowl, and then sprinkle the grass around the broken bowl. After feeding them a few times, as long as the chickens heard the sound of this old man knocking on the bowl, they would run over. This old man didn't even need to call them. Xiaohua said, however, once this old man was lazy and didn't gather grass. When it was time to feed the chickens, this old man was afraid of being spanked by my parents, so as long as I knocked on the bowl again, there was no grass around the broken bowl. However, those chickens still ran over. Fellow immortals, what breed of chickens do you think this old man raised at home? The demons were dumbfounded. Xiaohua's question clearly had nothing to do with this story. They really didn't know how to answer. Several human cultivators also asked curiously, Fellow immortal, what breed of chickens do you have? Stupid chicken. Xiaohua replied resolutely and decisively, and then sat down calmly. Haha. Not to mention the others and the demons, even Fujiwen, who was beside Xiaohua, laughed so hard that he held his stomach and said, Master, you old man are really too funny. Is that so? Xiaohua shrugged. This old man doesn't think so. This old man is just putting some jokes on other people's pain, especially those who like the nascent souls of Taoist cultivators. As he said this, Xiaohua narrowed his eyes and looked at the human cultivators in the distance who didn't seem to be very clear. The demons naturally reacted slowly. After a while, they started laughing. This laughter lasted for the time it took to brew a cup of tea. Xiaohua's story sounded very ordinary, but if one thought about it carefully, it would definitely be interesting. The more the demons thought about it, the more interesting it became. For a moment, they actually couldn't stop laughing. Xian Kong laughed for a while and sent the Buddhist formation to that person. That person helplessly took out 1,010,000 sea crystals and put the Buddhist formation away. Fellow immortals. Xian Kong coughed a few times. His voice was like thunder, and it finally suppressed the laughter of the demons. The bidding for the Buddhist formation has ended. Next is the demonic formation. Actually, according to the order, the Buddhist formation would be followed by the formation and the origin formation. This Xian Kong was also a clever person. How could he not know how to take advantage of the situation? He hurriedly placed the demonic formation in front of him. Needless to say, the bidding that followed was very intense. It was really rare to see such a scene in an ordinary auction. Not only were the demons bidding loudly, but they were also shouting, "Stupid chicken," loudly. Their satisfaction was self-evident. Xiaohua sat there lazily. What formation, demonic formation, Buddhist formation, and origin formation? How could they enter his eyes? The innate divine restriction outside his Naiwan palace was enough for him to comprehend for a lifetime. He didn't have any reason to spend origin stones on it. The human cultivator who bid against Xiaohua gritted his teeth and looked at Xiaohua, quietly waiting for him to bid again. Unfortunately, while he was waiting, the bidding for the formation had already ended. Fellow immortals. Xian Kong smiled and spoke again. Now, it's time for the final round of the auction. However, before he could finish speaking, a small swordfish suddenly swam over from a corner of the auction house and landed in front of Xian Kong. When Xian Kong saw the swordfish, he raised his head slightly and glanced in Xiao Hua's direction. Xiao Hua straightened his back. He understood that the swordfish had brought news of his soul-nourishing pill. Sure enough, Xian Kong took the swordfish and held it in his hand for a moment. The swordfish turned into demon runes and landed on the back of his hand. Xian Kong nodded slightly and said with a smile, "Fellow immortals, the nascent soul that was previously put on hold can now be auctioned. However, in view of the confidentiality of this fellow immortals transaction, the Yazi auction house won't announce the specific details. Please understand, fellow immortals." Wait. The demons didn't say anything, but that person stood up and said, "What? Fellow immortal, do you have any objections?" Xian Kong wasn't surprised and asked with a smile. That person said, "No matter what this fellow immortal offers the North Sea Dragon Palace, this old man can also offer it. Moreover, I can offer 10% more to the North Sea Dragon Palace." Boom. The group of demons were elated once more. This human was way too cocky. In fact, some of the demons even laughed out, "Fellow immortal, have you been angered to the point of losing your mind? Why are you so arrogant?" "That's right. Fellow immortal, your words are too arrogant," Xian Kong said disapprovingly. That person took out an item from his bosom and was about to give it to Xian Kong. However, he hesitated slightly and took out a heaven and earth bangle. He put the item into the heaven and earth bangle and smiled as he handed the heaven and earth bangle to Xian Kong. He said, "I'm speaking with this item. I don't know if it's trustworthy." Xian Kong seemed to be lost in thought as he received the world bracelet, and then he glanced at it before a wave of surprise and solemnity appeared on his face. He thought for a moment before he laughed bitterly and said, "Fellow Taoist, please wait for a moment. I'm unable to make the decision in this matter. A good activity where a pie falls from the sky, a cool phone awaits you. Click on the Chinese website's official account, add a friend on WeChat, add a public account, type KDRED, and participate immediately. Everyone has a prize. Follow KDRED's official account immediately." Chapter 3930. Oh! After hearing Xian Kong's words, Xiao Hua was naturally even more certain that this person was an immortal emissary from the Immortal Palace. However, the crowd of demons was somewhat surprised. All the demons' heads habitually looked towards that person. Of course, this time they were not urging that person to bid. As he spoke, Xian Kong pointed his hand and a wave appeared out of thin air. Xian Kong placed the heaven and earth bracelet on top of the wave. That wave swirled in the air and disappeared. "My apologies, fellow immortals. Please wait for a moment. There should be a reply soon." As Xian Kong spoke, he simply stopped hosting the auction and stood there waiting. Sure enough, in just the time it took to brew a cup of tea, another swordfish swam back with the heaven and earth bracelet in its mouth. All the demons were eagerly waiting. They all anxiously watched the swordfish land in Xian Kong's hand and quietly waited for Xian Kong's explanation. Xian Kong took the heaven and earth bracelet. The swordfish also turned into demon runes and disappeared on the back of his hand. Xian Kong did not hesitate to raise his hand to control the wave and send the heaven and earth bracelet back to that person. He said with a smile, "I'm afraid you can't take what this fellow immortal offers. Therefore, my Yazi auction house will only trade with this fellow immortal." "How is that possible?" That person stood up in surprise and shouted, "How can the hidden immortal continent have something that this old man can't provide?" Although that person was cautious and did not say the two words, "Immortal Palace," from his tone, other than the demons who did not understand, perhaps some humans had already begun to think about it. "That's right. Fellow immortal really can't provide it," Xian Kong said and then transmitted his voice to Xiao Hua. "The soul-nourishing pill provided by fellow immortal is indeed not bad, but it hasn't reached the effect of the 4 revolutions soul-nourishing pill. Therefore, my Yazi auction house can trade with fellow immortal, but the amount." After saying that, Xian Kong also cautiously told him the number. If the Immortal Palace hadn't interfered, Xiao Hua might not have known the importance of his soul-nourishing pills, and he might have been bewitched by Xian Kong. However, since the Immortal Palace couldn't provide it, he could only compete with Yazi in this world. Therefore, Xiaohua began to bargain without hesitation. However, after a few exchanges, Xiaohua was defeated. After all, the yuaning was something that Xiaohua had to obtain. Xian Kong, who had grasped this crucial point, didn't care about Xiaohua's tricks at all. He casually made some concessions and refused to relent. Xiaohua had no choice but to follow Xian Kong's instructions and take out a sufficient amount of soul-nourishing pills. However, when Xiaohua sent the souls of the 13 yuaning into his lower dantian to nourish them, a smile appeared on his face again. Refining the soul-nourishing pill was as easy as lifting a finger for the green-robed Xiaohua. If not for the lack of time, Xiaohua was prepared to let the soul cultivator Xiaohua refine the soul-nourishing pill. Presumably, the soul-nourishing pill refined by the old man would be even better than this soul-nourishing pill, right? In exchange for 13 nascent soul spirit bodies that can cultivate scattered soul, no matter how you look at it, Xiaohua has gained a huge advantage. These are the credentials of the two distinguished guests. Xian Kong looked at Xiaohua, then looked at the somewhat dazed person from the Immortal Palace. He took out 2 silver Yazi statues from his bosom, waved his hand, and gave them to the 2 people, saying, "Since the 2 immortal friends stepped out of the auction, as long as you bid in the business of my North Sea Dragon Palace, you will enjoy a certain discount. For the specific list and content, please refer to the records in the credentials." Immortal friend Xian. How could the person from the Immortal Palace care about some small favor from the North Sea Dragon Palace? He took the credentials and asked with extreme unwillingness, "I don't know what that immortal friend used." This person from the Immortal Palace had been sitting there like a mountain and bidding with Xiaohua. Although he had been teased by Xiaohua time and time again, he was still able to maintain his composure and did not force Xian Kong to trade his nascent soul as soon as possible. This was because he believed that there was nothing the Immortal Palace couldn't take out. Even when he later realized that Xiaohua might be a Buddhist cultivator, he didn't panic too much. After all, on the hidden Immortal Continent, the token of the Immortal Palace was much more useful than a Buddhist cultivator. But he really didn't expect that in the end, things would actually fall short of success. He really couldn't figure out what good thing a Buddhist cultivator could give to the North Sea Dragon Palace. Unfortunately, before he could finish speaking, Xian Kong waved his hand and said with a smile, "This is a secret of my North Sea Dragon Palace. It has nothing to do with others. Immortal friends, next is the fish slave auction that you have been waiting for a long time. Are you ready?" "We are ready." Several monsters with loud voices roared in unison. Their eyes were immediately filled with bestial bloodlust. Clat, clat. Xian Kong chuckled. He clapped his hands lightly, and the entire auction hall suddenly turned dark. At the instant darkness enveloped it, the sound of a flute leisurely resounded from the darkness, and the clamorous auction hall hurriedly quieted down. After that, a ray of light that seemed like a dream appeared at the center of the auction hall. As the light scattered, a pure white body that seemed like a crystal appeared within the light. The body was as white as jade, and traces of red were faintly discernible within the whiteness. Moreover, a naked mermaid had appeared within the light. 1,000,000 sea crystals. Just as the entire auction hall was swallowing saliva, a faint voice broke the silence of the auction hall. The legendary, throwing a brick to attract jade, was probably like this. After 1,000,000, 1,000,000, 2,000,000, etc., all of them were attracted. What the monsters couldn't stand the most was that whenever a monster made a bid, the mermaid would swing her tail and swim towards that monster. And when a new bid was made, the mermaid would glare at that monster with hidden bitterness and swim to another place. The entire auction hall was pitch black. The mermaid, cloaked in multicolored light, could be seen seductively swimming around above the heads of the monsters. It was as if the darkness was the sea she was swimming in. Disciple. In the darkness, Xiaohua was somewhat bewildered. He transmitted his voice, "This mermaid, what's the use of bidding for it?" "The master, if you want to know, why don't you bid for one? Disciple doesn't have a master's wife." "Shut up," Xiaohua scolded. "Be careful or I'll buy one for you. Let Bayamo ignore you again." "Yes, master." Fu Jiwen was well behaved, but his eyes were dishonestly sweeping over the mermaid's body. This kind of tofu, any male who had touched meat would not let it go. In the end, this lovely mermaid was bought by a monster with a price that made Xiao Hua's throat dry. Cough cough, actually, the price was not necessarily high. The problem was that Xiao Hua's throat had been dry ever since the mermaid came out. Of course, not all monsters and humans were attracted by this extremely tempting mermaid. The immortal envoy from the immortal palace sat on the chair and used his hand to pinch his chin as he secretly pondered. No matter if it was pondering about Xiao Hua's origin or how to snatch the nascent soul from Xiao Hua's hands. Unfortunately, although the restrictions of the Yazi auction hall looked simple and didn't have any special places to hide the figures of humans or monsters, the key point was that the faces were blurred. Moreover, he also knew that after the auction, the entire auction hall would have more than 10 exits. At that time, the lights and shadows would change, and no one would know who left from where. He really wouldn't be able to find where Xiao Hua went. Perhaps, I can only go out and make arrangements in advance. The immortal envoy from the immortal palace was somewhat helpless. Although he also knew that after the auction, who knew how many monsters would leave from here? How could he possibly find traces of Xiao Hua? However, since he knew that Xiao Hua was the Buddhist sect's bodhisattva, perhaps it would be of some help. There were a total of 8 mermaids who acted as fish slaves, and each of them bid an extremely high price. Among these 8 mermaids, there were also some rare and valiant demonic beasts. However, those were just decorations and couldn't even be considered as green leaves. When the last mermaid fell into the arms of a monster, the entire auction hall was filled with light. Xian Kong flew out from the center of the auction hall and said with a smile, "Many thanks for your support, fellow immortals. Tonight's auction is over. Next will be the Yazi Battle Hall's Battle Hall. Fellow immortals are welcome to participate. If you don't want to participate, you can leave when the demonic formation in the auction hall changes. Fellow immortals, please don't worry. The changes in the demonic formation will completely conceal your whereabouts. No one will know where you will leave from. Fellow immortals who don't want to leave, please don't worry. Your seats will also change when the demonic formation changes. No one will know where you will sit in a while." After saying that, Xian Kong nodded a few times. He raised his hands and cupped them before his figure disappeared. Looking back at the auction ground that was originally as smooth as flowing water, there were some changes slowly taking place in the center of the auction ground. Several holes with fences appeared on the 4 walls. Every fence had a water-blue brilliance on it, blocking the Yuan senses and vision of the demons. However, from the holes, a series of deafening roars came out. Hearing that the auction had ended, Xiao Hua stood up. However, when he heard Xian Kong mention the wrestling competition, Xiao Hua's heart skipped a beat. He immediately thought of the 2 demonic beasts, the Kunli and the rhinoceros, who were fighting each other at the beginning of the auction. The fight between the 2 demonic beasts should be the so-called wrestling competition. However, Xiao Hua was thinking more than that. He clearly remembered that when he met Xiao Jian and Yuan Ya in the early years, Xiao Jian once said that Yuan Ya was picked up in a battle hall. Moreover, when he picked up Yuan Ya, he also promised the battle hall that when Yuan Ya came back to life, he would go to the battle hall to participate in a battle hall. This was the price he had to pay for taking Yuan Ya away. Although this period of time should have already passed, and Xiao Hua had not seen an arena in the hidden immortal continent for so many years, Xiao Hua had almost forgotten about it. However, the appearance of the Yazi arena once again brought back this not-so-distant memory. A good event where a pie falls from the sky. Cool phones are waiting for you. Chapter 39-31. Xiao Hua thought for a while and said in a low voice, "Disciple, I have some things to ask Yuan Ya to come out. You go back to the Kunlun Wonderland to cultivate first." "Yes, master." Fujiwen looked at the changing scenery around him and knew that the demon formation had been activated. It was a good opportunity for him to leave. Xiao Hua released his soul consciousness and formed a seal with his hands. He sent Fujiwen back to the space with a wave of his sleeve and then pulled Yuan Ya out. Xiao Hua's actions were very secretive. His current cultivation was high enough. This moment of action did not attract the attention of any demon race or even the North Sea Dragon Palace. "Master." Yuan Ye was a little stunned when he was suddenly pulled out. When he looked around, he hurriedly bowed. "No need to be so polite," Xiaohua said. His eyes turned slightly. The mana around his body flashed and his face turned into Xiao Jian's appearance. Yuan Ye was naturally puzzled when he saw Xiaohua's transformation. However, looking at Xiao Jian's familiar face, Yuan Ye's eyes were filled with sadness and his heart was filled with mixed feelings. "Disciple, don't be anxious. Wait a while and look around," Xiaohua said in a low voice. "I remember that you came from the arena. You still owe the arena a fight. This kind of thing is karma. If you don't understand it, it might have nothing to do with your current cultivation. However, who knows what kind of trouble it will cause in the future." Yuan Ye looked around. The demon matrix was still changing, and there were also water ripples beneath him. He couldn't see anything, so he said, "Master told me about this. I had already fainted and didn't know anything. I don't know if what Master said is true." The master Yuan Ye mentioned was naturally Xiao Jian. At this time, Yuan Ye still called Xiao Jian Master. This was also his nature. Xiaohua also sighed slightly when he heard this. Whether Xiao Jian's words were true or false, only he himself knew. The karma between Yuan Ye and the arena might be made up by Xiao Jian. "No matter what, just believe it for now," Xiaohua sighed. Yuan Ye nodded. "I will listen to Master's instructions. I will return it to them. I don't want to owe anyone a favor. It's just that this disciple doesn't know where the gladiator arena is, and I don't know how to return it to him. Hee, take a look over there." Xiaohua laughed as he raised his hand and pointed at the center of the auction hall. Hiss. Yuan Ye raised his head to look and unconsciously sucked in a breath of cold air. His hands involuntarily clenched into fists and the veins on his arms bulged like dragons. Even his body was trembling slightly and his teeth were tightly clenched together. Where Yuan Ye's gaze landed, the originally flat ground was now filled with many stones. The stones were in an irregular shape. There was grass, mud, and even some sharp spikes on the ground between the stones. In addition to the stones, there was some scarlet water around the ground. Some white bones that had not been corroded floated on the water. Some bubbles appeared in the water. It looked extremely poisonous. On the left side of the holes in the walls, there were blood stains all over. There were even some skeletons and white bones scattered on the ground. It looked very eerie. Seeing Yuan Ye's strange behavior, Xiaohua already understood. Even if this gladiator arena was not the gladiator arena that Yuan Ye used to be in, it must have some connection to that place. "Master!" Yuan Ye calmed down with great difficulty. He looked at Xiaohua and said, "This gladiator arena is very similar to the gladiator arena that disciple used to be in, but it is not the gladiator arena that disciple used to be in." Xiaohua nodded and said, "Sit here and take a look. Master will think about what to do." "Yes, Master." Yuan Ye gently sat down and looked at the gladiator arena that was gradually becoming clear. He gradually became confused, cold, nostalgic, and confused. All kinds of emotions surged out like bubbles. Xiaohua paid attention to Yuan Ye's expression and secretly nodded. He understood that this gladiator arena was where Yuan Ye went after leaving the mystic jade dark forest. Other than Diao Wu, this gladiator arena was probably one of Yuan Ye's worries. Diao Wu's worries had already been solved by Diao Wu, and the gladiator arena's worries would also be solved today. Calling Yuan Ye out was definitely the right decision. A moment later, all the seats became clear. The figures of the monster race and human race on the seats also began to appear. Sure enough, as Xian Kong said, the seats were completely messed up. Xiaohua had already moved to another place and was much closer to the gladiator arena. Even if Xiaohua spoke now, the celestial emissaries of the celestial palace would not be able to find him. Dong dong dong. A series of military drums sounded and a bloody color suddenly appeared in the center of the gladiator arena. The bloody color became even bigger and in a moment, it formed a ball of blood that was dozens of feet large in the air. Dong. The military drums sounded in unison and then two large hands stretched out from the center of the blood ball. These large hands were furry and had sharp armor that flashed with a cold light. The large hands tore left and right, and the entire blood ball opened like a curtain of snow. A flood dragon wearing blood armor rushed out from within. This flood dragon's blood armor was engraved with complicated demon characters. The demon characters were covered with thick blood marks, and a strong murderous aura was emitted from this blood armor. Not to mention this flood dragon's huge body, on its ferocious flood dragon face, there was a deep blood mark that cut its entire face in half. Its already terrifying face revealed a murderous aura. When the flood dragon walked out of the blood ball, the entire blood ball turned into a blood cloud and landed under the flood dragon's feet. The flood dragon raised its head and swept its cold gaze across the faces of all the monster race. Then, it cupped its hands and said, "This old man is Ao Feng from the Yazi Gladiator Arena. Greetings, fellow immortals." However, before the demon race could make a move, Ma Yingfeng said again, "Before the auction, I believe all of you have already seen the battle between Kunli and the rhinoceros. This old man can guarantee that it was merely an appetizer. The following battle will be 100 times more exciting than the previous one." "Good." The monster race loudly shouted. The blood chi that they did not vent on the mermaid rushed to their heads again. "Today's battle will be divided into 10 battles." Ma Yingfeng's expression did not change. He still said coldly, "Every round has 2 demon beasts, or many demon beasts fighting. Fellow immortals, you can bet on which demon beast will win based on your own judgment." Ao Feng then said a lot more. It was nothing more than how to bet, how to win, and how to get the sea crystals that you won. However, Xiaohua did not hear any of this. He was thinking about how to negotiate with the Yazi Gladiator Arena about Yuanya. In the end, Ao Feng said, "The corpse of the defeated monster will be the same as the previous auction. Fellow immortals who are interested can bid. As for the winning monster, if any fellow immortals are not satisfied, they can also come out and challenge. However, my Yazi Gladiator Arena will not be responsible for the life and death of the fellow immortals. Of course, if fellow immortals win, then fellow immortals can take away 70% of the bets that fellow immortals have placed on fellow immortals." Damn it, the last time I saw a bear spirit, he earned 2 million sea crystals. That bear spirit wasn't beaten down by a demonic beast, but was beaten down by sea crystals. A demonic beast with a loud voice shouted, "Today, I want a challenge too." "Good, if fellow immortals are interested, you can go to the side door to register now. Because there are only 10 matches, only 10 immortal friends can participate in the matches tonight." Just as Ma Yingfeng finished speaking, several whirlwinds appeared and several demons flew towards the side door that was shining with light. See? Hearing that there were so many benefits to challenging, Xiaohua sucked in a breath of cold air. He could not help but have doubts in his heart. Could it be, this is Xiao Jian's lie? He said there was a battle with the arena. Could it be that he wants to earn primeval stones? Is he trying to deceive Yuanya? Damn it, don't push, don't push. Xiaohua looked over. In just an instant, there were already dozens of large monsters piled up at the side door. A few monsters were squeezed in the middle and shouted. Ao Feng glanced at them and said, "However, fellow immortals who are preparing for the battle, please pay attention. In my Yazi Gladiator Arena, no demonic techniques can be used. As long as you enter the arena, all of your cultivation will be restricted. All of your fights will have to rely on your body. Also, my Yazi Gladiator Arena divides the monster race into 8 levels. If fellow immortal's body is stronger than the monster race, then you can only be restricted again until your body reaches the same level." "Ah? Why didn't you say so earlier?" When the demon clan members who were huddled together heard this, they were all shocked. Of course, their physical bodies were strong, but they were still inferior to Kun Lai and the male rhinoceros in the arena. Moreover, Ma Jinfeng's last words had killed off the idea of some monster race cultivators who wanted to rely on their bodies that had been tempered for countless years to bully monster beasts. Fellow immortals, go back to your seats and think about it. It won't be too late to make a decision after the battle starts. Ao Feng did not miss the opportunity to say. Since there was a way out, the dozens of demons naturally scattered like monkeys when the tree fell. Ao Feng didn't delay and pointed at the bloody walls and said, "Fellow immortals, today's first battle is Ku Pai against John Hong." Following the beating of the war drums, dark green demonic clouds emerged from the two holes. Furious roars resounded throughout the entire arena. Then, two huge cages flew out from the holes. The cages were made of thick ice pillars. There was a layer of demonic runes on the pillars. Looking inside the cages, one was the huge Ku Pai and the other was the bad-tempered Zhan Hong. Ku Pai was close to 100 feet in size. Its 4 legs were as solid as stone pillars. On its back, there were 4 layers of scales that looked like iron sheets. The edges of each scale were extremely sharp. Ku Pai's head was like a snake's head. On its huge head, there was a 1-meter-long spike. At this moment, Ku Pai was lazily standing in the cage. Its snake-like head peeked out of the cage and its dark eyes looked around. Zhan Hong was a square-shaped monster. Its body was covered in scales, and its head, which had almost no neck, was hexagonal. There was a sharp mane at the junction of each side, and the mane was flashing with a blue luster. At this moment, Zhan Hong was not as calm as Ku Pai. Instead, it roared and slammed into the ice pillars of the cage. Every time it slammed into the ice pillars, the demonic runes on them flashed rapidly. What a good event for a pie in the sky. Cool phones waiting for you. Chapter 39-32. Fellow immortals, you can place your bets and see which demonic beast will win. Ma Yingfeng urged the blood-red demonic cloud and flew to the left of the 2 cages. He took out a steel spear from his heaven and earth bracelet and waved it. The 2 cages flew out of the arena and floated in front of the eyes of the entire demon race and human race so that the demons could see clearly. Come, disciple, follow your master. Regardless of whether there is one or not, we still have to confirm it first. Xiaohua looked at the cages flying around and felt disgust in his heart. He stood up and said while walking towards the side door. Yes, Yuan Ye responded and stood up to follow him. Walking to the side door, there was a shrimp soldier standing there bored to death. Seeing the 2 humans coming over, he pointed the halberd in his hand and said, "Human, stop. This is the arena's forbidden area. Humans are not allowed to enter." This old man's disciple wants to challenge a demonic beast. Xiaohua looked at the halberd and said indifferently without stopping his steps. "Ah? You want to challenge a demonic beast?" That shrimp soldier was stunned. He had never heard of a human challenging a demonic beast in the arena. "That's right." Xiaohua nodded. "However, the demonic beast my disciple wants to challenge might not be the one in the arena. You may not be able to make the decision on this matter. Call the manager over." Hee. That shrimp soldier laughed nastily and said, "This old man has seen a lot of people, but I have never seen a person who wants to court death so much. This old man is responsible for registering the demonic beasts that want to challenge. If your disciple wants to challenge, he can do so. If he doesn't want to challenge, he can also scram. As for finding a manager, do you humans think you have the qualifications? How dare you?" Xiaohua's eyes flashed with a cold light. That shrimp soldier suddenly felt an aura that was even more vast than the waves coming from Xiaohua's body. Moreover, this aura seemed to have grown sharp teeth and bit out his fear in an instant. Ah! The shrimp soldier was horrified, and the halberd in his hand fell to the ground. His body trembled as he quickly retreated. Xiaohua coldly snorted, withdrew his pressure, and coldly said, "Damned thing, why aren't you calling out the person in charge?" Yes, I'll go now." That shrimp soldier didn't even care about his halberd as he hurriedly ran over. In just a short moment, Xian Kong actually flew out from inside. He looked at Xiaohua with a frown and said, "Fellow immortal, if you want to fight, you can register. Why do you need me to come out?" "Fellow immortal Xian. I am Xiao Jian." Xiaohua cupped his hands and said with a smile, "This auction allowed me to witness fellow immortal's elegance. Although I didn't bid for anything, fellow immortal left a deep impression on me. As the saying goes, don't slap a smiling person." Even though Xian Kong frowned when he heard Xiaohua speak like this, he couldn't bring himself to flare up, so he could only nod and say, "Fellow immortal, feel free to speak your mind." "Oh, it's like this." Xiaohua told him about Abyss Cliff, and then he said in the end, "Even though I remember this agreement with the arena, I've always been drifting outside all these years, and I didn't have the time to return. When I saw the Yazi arena tonight, I thought of this, so I came to look for fellow immortal Xian. Is that arena the North Sea Dragon Palace's arena? If this disciple of mine is at the Yazi arena, can he fulfill the agreement as well? I see. Xian Kong nodded when he heard this and said, My Northern Sea Dragon Palace has the Qianyo Arena, Yanzi Arena, Bai, an Arena, Paleo Arena, Taotai Arena, Baxia Arena, Bai, an Arena, Fu, an Arena, and Qi, an arena within the 9 prefectures of Hidden Immortal Continent. If what fellow immortal said is true, then it's one of the other 8 arenas. Could it be that there aren't any other arenas on Hidden Immortal Continent? Xiaohua asked curiously. Xian Kong nodded and said proudly, That's right. Since my North Sea Dragon Palace wants to build an arena, how can any other demon race or human race build an arena? As he spoke, Xian Kong looked at Xiaohua from top to bottom, and then looked at Abyss Cliff, and said meaningfully, It seems that fellow immortal is a man of his word. You still remember the promise you made with my North Sea Dragon Palace. In this way, you've profited from a disaster. This old man has made the decision to temporarily exempt the 2 of you from the 10,000 kill order. Similarly, according to the previous agreement, this Do Nu must have his final battle in my Yazi arena. As long as he wins, this old man can remove the Do slave seal from my North Sea Dragon Palace. He can then leave this place safely and regain his freedom. 10,000 kill order? Warrior slave seal? Xiaohua was stunned. He didn't expect that there were so many secrets. Moreover, Abyss Cliff had been following Xiao Jian, so Xiaohua didn't carefully investigate whether there were any restrictions in Abyss Cliff's body. However, Xiaohua also believed that even if he really did investigate, with the methods of the North Sea Dragon Palace, he definitely wouldn't find anything strange. Xian Kong said proudly, Of course. Fellow immortal, do you think it's so easy to get out of my North Sea Dragon Palace's arena? If it weren't for the warrior slave seal, how could the dragon generals of other arenas dare to easily release the warrior slave recorded in the battle strategy? Moreover, fellow immortal, you didn't come to my North Sea Dragon Palace at the agreed time. Your name and the warrior slave's name have already been on the arena's 10,000 kill order. Perhaps the arena didn't have time to find you, or maybe they didn't find you. But if you didn't take the initiative to come to my Yazi arena, I'm afraid that the next time you see the demon race in the arena, you will be killed as soon as you see them. I'm lucky. Xiaohua had already concealed his cultivation at this time. Even Xian Kong could only see that Xiaohua's cultivation was only at the early yuaning stage. He was so lucky that Xian Kong couldn't see any flaws. Fellow immortal, please wait a moment. As Xian Kong spoke, he took out something that looked like a dragon horn from the Cosmos bracelet on his arm. With a "Piu," he spat out a mouthful of demon chi, and the dragon horn let out a clear cry. Soon after, a triangular bronze mirror shot out from the dragon horn. There were 3 Yazis coiled around the edges of the bronze mirror, and their heads and tails were connected. Moreover, there was also a faint opening of a Yazi's mouth in the bronze mirror. A flickering jade sword could be seen faintly within the mouth. Fellow immortal, you don't have to resist. This old man's Yazi battle strategy is to check fellow immortal's appearance and the record of the warrior slave. Xian Kong reminded. Without waiting for Xiaohua to say anything, he shook his hand and the so-called battle strategy flashed out a golden light curtain that covered Xiaohua and Yuanya. Xiaohua frowned and then relaxed. He was extremely uncomfortable with Xian Kong's contempt. But thinking that it was for the sake of Yuan Ya's warrior slave seal and to avoid trouble in the future, he ignored it. Clang! A sword cry came from the battle strategy. Dozens of sword lights that looked like swimming dragons shot out from the Yazi's mouth and pierced towards Xiaohua and Yuan Ya. At this moment, the battle strategy in Xian Kong's hand had turned blood red. Return! Xian Kong roared. The battle strategy in his hand produced a blood-red suction force. The dozens of sword lights shattered and returned to the battle strategy. Xiaohua's face was pale as he said in a low voice, "Fellow immortal Xian, what's going on?" Xian Kong looked at Xiaohua and said indifferently, "Sure enough, it's not out of my expectations. You two have already been placed on the 10,000 kill command. But now, this old man has temporarily suppressed the 10,000 kill command. As long as this warrior slave wins a battle, this old man can remove the warrior slave seal for him. Alright. Xiao Hua nodded and said, then let's do it according to the rules of the North Sea Dragon Palace. At this point, Xiao Hua suddenly asked, oh right. If this disciple of I wins, can I take the bet? Let this old man take a look. Xian Kong didn't find it strange at all. His gaze fell onto the battle strategy. At this moment, the battle strategy had the image of Xiao Jian and Yuan Ya on it. There were also some densely packed demon characters below. Baxia, level 4 gladiator beast, was taken away from the arena by the cultivator of the Dao sect, Xiao Jian, because he was seriously ill. Before he left, he made an agreement that if he recovered from his illness, he would return to the arena 3 years later for the final battle. 20% of the bet would belong to Xiao Jian. Baxia's warrior slave seal hasn't been removed, and he hasn't returned as promised. I hereby issue the 10,000 kill command. Anyone who sees him is to kill him and receive a reward of 5,000. Xian Kong spoke word by word in an extremely cold manner. Ha good. Xiao Hua clapped his hands and laughed. That laughter of his had a profound meaning. When he looked at Yuan Ya again, the reluctance in his eyes had gradually disappeared. At this moment, he finally understood why Xiao Jian had rescued him from the arena. Fellow immortal, did you hear? Xian Kong looked up at Xiao Hua and said, Baxia's warrior slave seal won't be removed as long as he doesn't die. Therefore, fellow immortal coming to my Yazi arena today was the most correct choice. Yes, I'll have to trouble fellow immortal. Xiao Hua's smile was so wretched that it was no different from Xiao Jian's. Xian Kong looked at Yuan Ya and said, Baxia, come with me. Yuan Ya replied expressionlessly. That. Xiao Hua smiled and said, fellow immortal Xian, I wonder how my disciple will fight? Can you tell I a little bit? Xian Kong was a bit impatient and said indifferently, it's just a level 4 gladiator beast. This old man will arrange a level 4 gladiator beast to fight with him. I won't make things too difficult for him. Yes, Xiao Hua nodded and asked carefully, then can he use weapons? Of course he can't use weapons. Even Dao sect cultivation methods can't. Xian Kong waved his hand and said, before entering the arena, a demon general will seal his lower dantian. Yes, I'll have to trouble fellow immortal Xian. Xiao Hua smiled and said again. Then he patted Yuan Ya and said, disciple, the happiness of the rest of Master's life is in your hands. In a while, Master will bet more on you. Yuan Ya hated Xiao Jian's appearance. Although he knew that this was Xiao Hua, he still replied indifferently. Xiao Hua naturally wouldn't be at ease with Xian Kong taking Yuan Ya away like this. Instead, he secretly placed a strand of soul consciousness on Yuan Ya's body. Then, he turned around and prepared to leave. However, after taking 2 steps, Xiao Hua was still worried and pulled the green-robed Xiao Hua out of the space. He had him control the formless nascent soul and follow behind Yuan Ya. What a good event where a pie falls from the sky. Cool phones are waiting for you. Chapter 39-33. When Xiao Hua returned to the arena and sat back in his seat, he could no longer sense that strand of soul consciousness. The North Sea Dragon Palace's demonic array restriction had indeed exceeded Xiao Hua's expectations. However, with the green-robed Xiao Hua by Yuan Ya's side, Xiao Hua was not afraid of any special accidents. When Xiao Hua sat down, the battle between Ku Pai and Zhan Hong was nearing its end. The 2 demonic beasts were covered in wounds and blood. However, for the sake of survival, they continued to roar and pounce at each other. Every time they attacked, the 2 demonic beasts would spill a lot of blood and flesh from their bodies. Such a bloody battle. No wonder Yuan Ya doesn't want to remember it. In this cruel battle arena, he doesn't even have a name. Xiao Hua looked at the bloody battle and thought to himself, Baxia 4, 7, 8, 8, 6, 9, 8, 6, 9, which is the Baxia Gladiator Arena. Furthermore, it's a level 4 gladiator beast. Zhan Hong was like a small mountain, fiercely charging at Ku Pai. Ku Pai stretched out his head and bit Zhan Hong's back. Even his sharp thorns tore off large chunks of Zhan Hong's flesh. However, Zhan Hong stubbornly held on to Ku Pai's heart. Boom! A loud sound sent Ku Pai crashing into the wall of the arena. The entire arena seemed to be shaking. Ku Pai struggled for a moment before finally lowering his unyielding head. Boom! All the beasts were excited. The screams and roars from before became louder and louder. Perhaps it was because they won the bet, or perhaps it was because of the excitement. Xiao Hua sighed slightly. He sat on his seat and closed his eyes to adjust his breathing. Hee, fellow immortal, do you feel that it's a bit bloody? Suddenly, a voice appeared in Xiao Hua's heart. Xiao Hua didn't open his eyes. His consciousness entered his body and saw that the scholarly cultivator Xiao Hua was already standing in his middle dantian with a smile on his face. The scholarly cultivator Xiao Hua from before didn't have the same outstanding appearance as before. All the sword chi and sword forms had disappeared. Only the pages of his book remained. Inscriptions of armor flashed in his eyes. The aura of the inscriptions of armor was far stronger than that of ordinary scholarly cultivators. However, the current Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua was no different from an ordinary Confucian scholar. He wore a light cyan Confucian robe, and his refined temperament was revealed from his clear black and white eyes. That upright and plain-spoken aura could only be faintly seen between his brows. As for the sharp sword from before, it was still hanging at his waist. The scabbard was also gone. However, the sword didn't have any sword chi. It looked no different from an ordinary sword. Fellow immortal, fellow immortal. Jade Archive Xiao Hua cupped his hands and said, I didn't expect fellow immortal to enter the state of concealing his divine splendor in just a few days. Of course. The Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua lightly returned the greeting. Before I started cultivating as a Confucian cultivator, I was originally residing within sword intent. My understanding of sword intent and sword chi has already penetrated deep into my bones. Although the sword intent of Cast Emotion Mountain was formed by heaven and earth, in my eyes, it was just a shocking sword strike. Fellow immortal, you've already comprehended this heaven sword. Now that I've entered seclusion to comprehend it, it's a matter of course. Of course, the comprehension of the heaven sword heaven-earth sword is far from something we can achieve in one go. I still have a long way to go. The sword Tao is also the Confucian Tao, and it's also the heavenly Tao. I've obtained the soul of heaven and the soul of the earth. I've obtained the true essence of scholarly cultivation. My current cultivation has reached a higher level. This is what we should celebrate. Indeed. Jade Xiao Huan nodded with a smile. With a calm heart, all things will not perish. With a clear heart, there won't be a speck of dust. Monk Subhoodie has been in seclusion for so long, yet he still hasn't come out. His path in the Buddhist sect is too difficult. Xiao Hua said, however, some of the words of the Buddhist sect are very reasonable. If I had seen such bloodshed before, I would have wanted to use my sword to kill all these demons and monsters. But now that I've grasped the heaven sword heaven-earth sword, I somewhat understand that killing and bloodshed are a part of the world. They can never be eliminated by killing to stop killing. Previously, on the Dawn Rain continent, only sword transformation realm cultivators participated in the sword Tao battle. Those spirit swords and divine swords simply disdained to participate. And, even in the eyes of Tao sect cultivators like deity transformation realm cultivators, I'm afraid they also have such thoughts, right? I'm just soft-hearted. I can't see killing. Jade Xiaohua said with a smile, I can't wait for the people of the world to sing and laugh happily. Harmony breeds wealth. Singing and laughing isn't necessarily what fellow immortal pursues. Xiaohua said with a smile, harmony breeds wealth. The same. Jade Xiaohua clapped. Then, Xiaohua said with a serious expression, fellow immortal, when fellow immortal Tempered Bones asked you for a cultivation method, I thought it was a bit funny. But now, in my Confucian cultivation method, the heaven soul is complete and the earth soul is missing. The 5 cheese unifications cultivation method is still missing the water cheese unifications. Of the 5 heavenly hearts, besides the new heavenly heart which is half a piece, I still lack a piece of heavenly heart. Fellow immortal, why is it so difficult for you to get a cultivation method? Jade Xiaohua smiled bitterly and raised his hand to point at Xiaohua. Fellow immortal, you're not satisfied. The 5 cheese unifications cultivation method is the top cultivation method for Confucian cultivators. How could it be easy to get? Fellow immortal, you're already lucky to be able to see the secret inside. Especially, the mystery of the heavenly book's true solution is a secret that even Zhu Zi, Zheng Zi, and Sun Zi couldn't comprehend. We actually managed to see it by chance. The path to heaven has already appeared under our feet. Why should we be in a hurry? Haste makes waste. It's always been a big taboo in cultivation. I know. Xiaohua said with a smile. I'm just reminding fellow immortal. When you're proud, don't forget about me. You and I are the right path. I understand. Jade Xiaohua waved his hand and prepared to leave. After the auction, I will go look for the Yu province cauldron. Heavens can only rely on chance. I can't promise you anything. Thank you for your trouble, fellow immortal. Xiaohua returned the greeting with a smile. Xiaohua's mind left his middle dantian. The entire arena was still noisy like fire. There was simply no one sitting quietly like Xiaohua. After all, those who didn't leave the auction and participated in the arena were all here for this kind of blood and excitement. How could they give up on a regular scene? After another half an hour, seeing a large rock-like demonic beast tearing apart and devouring a duck-like demonic beast, Ma Yingfeng once again stepped on a blood cloud and appeared in the sky above the arena. Fellow immortals. Ma Yingfeng's face was still cold. He said word by word. Previously, this old man said that my Yazi arena arranged 10 matches for fellow immortals to enjoy. However, today, there is a beast that is about to leave the arena for its last match. Therefore, my Yazi arena temporarily added a match. Please enjoy. As he spoke, 2 cages flew out from the distant stone wall. One of them was naturally Yuanya. At this time, Yuanya had already changed his Taoist robe and was wearing some clothes sewn from beast skin. It only covered his vital parts. Yuanya looked very calm inside the cage, but a kind of barbaric and bloody aura uncontrollably rushed out from his body. Looking at the other cage, there was a huge sea python. Not to mention the length of this sea python, its body was thicker than Yuanya's. What was special was that the sea python was constantly swimming in the cage. The cage's restriction was slightly swaying. Layers of demonic characters flashed from time to time, as if the cage's restriction was unable to trap the sea python. Human? Seeing Yuanya, the crowd of demonic beasts and humans were all shocked. They had seen demonic beasts and sea beasts fighting in the arena, but they had never seen a human before. Even though it was their former residence, they still couldn't believe their eyes. Fellow immortals. Ma Yingfeng explained, this human race's gladiator beast is not from my Yazi gladiator arena. He belongs to hidden immortal continent's inland Ba Shang gladiator arena. In the inland gladiator arena, other than demonic beasts, there are also some humans. These humans are usually gifted and different from ordinary cultivators. This gladiator beast was Baxia 4, 7, 8, 8, 6, 9. It was a grade 4 demonic beast. Today is this beast's last match. If he wins, he can regain his freedom. Good. The crowd of demonic beasts shouted and became increasingly excited. The majority of them had never seen a battle between a human and a demonic beast. Thinking that such a small human was going to face such a huge sea beast, how could he suppress himself? Okay, fellow immortals, you can place your bets. Ma Yingfeng said indifferently. He waved his hand and the 2 cages landed on the arena. I throw the horned python. A demonic beast hurriedly patted his seat and took out a universe bangle. A bubble emerged from the seat. The demonic beast threw the universe bangle into the bubble and shouted, "This horned python's godly strength is astonishing. Even I had to escape when facing it. How can a human be its match?" That's right. This horned python is much more powerful than the male rhinoceros. Once it coils around you, even the male rhinoceros will end up with broken bones. Hee hee, the Yazzie gladiator arena sure is scheming. Many demons were even muttering softly. This is the final battle of the human race. They actually arranged for a horned python. How can this human escape from the arena's grasp? Not necessarily. Some demonic beasts laughed and said, "Don't forget that this human is Baksang, a level 4 demonic beast. If he doesn't have some strength, how can he be a level 4 demonic beast?" What's more special is that this human is the arena beast of Baksang Arena. After living for so long, he actually made it to the last match. I don't believe that he doesn't have any special talents. That's right, that's right. Another demonic beast chimed in. Humans are the most cunning. This fellow's head is comparable to a demonic beast. We will also bet on this human's victory. Nonsense. Another demonic beast shouted, "No matter how cunning this human is or how special his talents are, just look at the size of this horned python. It's only in the arena now. If it was placed in the ocean, any ship would be crushed by it. Baksang is a human and has some brains, but what's the use of his brains when facing such a gigantic beast? In the words of the human race, put yourself in its shoes. If you and I were facing this horned python, without using demonic arts or demon weapons, what are our chances of victory?" Chapter 39-34. Yes, yes. Following which, a few brainless demons chimed in. It was as though these demons were the brains of the Yazzie gladiator arena. After a while, the Chinquan rings were taken away by the Yazzie gladiator arena one by one. Xiaohua was originally resting with his eyes closed, but when he heard that Yuanya came out, he could no longer calm down and opened his eyes. When he heard the unscrupulous whispers of the nearby demons, he couldn't help but frown. What the demons said was not without reason. Although Yuanya was gifted, he had not been Xiaohua's disciple for a long time, and during this period, Xiaohua did not give him any special guidance. To be honest, Xiaohua was not confident about Yuanya's strength. But thinking about it, Yuanya was recorded as a level 4 gladiator beast in the arena's fighting strategy. Even if he did not practice the Fist of the North Star, his strength should still be at the level of a level 4 gladiator beast. From the style of the Yazzie gladiator arena, it should be considered fair. Therefore, this horned python looked a little arrogant and should also be a level 4 gladiator beast. Yuanya should not be at a disadvantage against this horned python. The only thing Xiaohua was worried about was that the Baxia gladiator arena was located in the interior of the hidden immortal continent. There should be fewer demons in the arena, and there should be more humans like Yuanya. Yuanya could dominate among the level 4 gladiator beasts, but that was only against humans. If he faced this horned python, he might be at a disadvantage in terms of size. Let's wait and see. Xiaohua narrowed his eyes. Green Robe has already gone, and others can't see what he does. If he doesn't succeed, this old man will also take action. It's fine if Yuanya suffers some minor injuries, but we can't let Yuanya die here. Dong. A military drum sounded. In the arena, whether it was Yuanya's cage or the horned python's cage, they suddenly disappeared, and one man and one beast fell from the sky. The horned python was originally rolling in the cage, but now that it was free, its entire body danced in the arena. Woo! A loud wind blew. Before Yuanya landed on the mountain rock, the horned python's tail drew a black line in the air and whipped towards his waist. Yuanya hurriedly urged his true energy to dodge, but his true energy was already confined by the Yazzie gladiator arena. How could he still use his flying technique? Seeing the python's tail, which was larger than his body, sweeping towards him fiercer than a mountain, Yuanya had an idea. He hurriedly curled up and rolled, falling down. Just as Yuanya dodged half of the snake's tail, the snake's tail had already reached him. Yuanya's back was facing the snake's tail, making it difficult for him to move his body. He could only use his elbows to block the snake's tail. Ping! A loud sound was heard as the snake's tail vibrated in the air and struck forward again. Yuanya was sent flying like a bullet. Boom! Another loud sound was heard as Yuanya's body was smashed into a large rock. The boulder was even harder than diamond. When Yuan Ye's body fell, he knocked a few pieces of the boulder away. Then, Yuan Ye's body softly slid down the stone wall. Looking at Yuan Ye's back, it was already a bloody mess. There was also a pool of blood on the stone wall. Damn it. Xiaohua's heart ached. He stood up and secretly complained to himself, "Am I too cruel? What kind of bullshit karma is this? When this old man's cultivation is deeper, I will directly use the hand of karma to block it. There is no reason for this poor child to suffer the torment of a demon beast." Good. A group of demons saw the man and the python fight and saw blood. They all shouted in ecstasy. Many demons also stood up. Looking at the horned python, it was obviously experienced in fighting. After its huge tail hit Yuanya, it swept him onto a pile of boulders. The python's body also nimbly flipped over, opened its mouth, flashed its ferocious fangs, and pounced towards Yuanya. Not good. Xiaohua was anxious. His figure was about to flash. At this time, Yuanya, who was originally soft, just happened to land on the ground. His feet bounced on the ground, and with a whoosh, his figure suddenly flashed to the side of the boulder. Pooh! The python's head fell and hit the boulder. At the same time, the python's head rubbed against the boulder. Damn it! Xiaohua smiled and stood still. He knew that his concern made him confused. He couldn't help but laugh at himself. Like I said, Yuanya has the strength of a 4th-level fighting beast. How could he be killed in the first battle? Now that he is injured, I'm afraid it's a trick to lure the enemy. The horned python's pounce missed and it rolled on the boulder again. Not only did it pounce towards Yuanya with a roar, its powerful tail also whipped towards Yuanya from time to time. Looking at Yuanya again, his figure was as nimble as an ape and as alert as a squirrel. His whole body was moving around the boulder, and he always avoided the horned python's fatal attack at the most critical moment. He seemed to be handling it with ease. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Yuanya escaped to a boulder. The horned python's tail wrapped around the boulder and cut off Yuanya's escape route. The python's head once again moved towards Yuanya's waist, which was climbing on top of the boulder, and fiercely bit down. Good. Seeing that the horned python had coiled up and Yuanya had no way out, the group of demons cheered loudly again. They were ready to see how Yuanya would be bitten into two by the horned python. However, out of all the demons' expectations, Yuanya didn't dodge like before. Instead, he stomped his feet on the boulder and his whole body shot towards the python's head like a sharp arrow. The horned python hissed and its shiny black scales trembled in excitement. Its pair of fangs were about to pierce into Yuanya's waist. At this moment, Yuanya suddenly moved his feet and his body swayed mysteriously. He suddenly executed the ethereal steps in midair and dodged the horned python's attack in an instant. He rushed into the horned python's neck. Ah! The group of demons exclaimed in disappointment. However, their exclamations had just begun when they saw Yuanya rushing into the horned python's body. His 10 fingers spread open like a pair of iron claws clasping onto the horned python's scales. With a muffled sound, green blood splattered and Yuanya's hands actually pierced into the horned python's body. Impossible! How is this possible? A few demons shouted. The horned python doesn't just have tough skin and thick flesh, its scales are even comparable to a demon artifact. Not to mention human hands, even demon beasts or demon artifacts would only cause sparks to fly when they hit it. The horned python was in pain. Its entire body rolled on the boulder and smashed towards the ground with Yuanya. At this moment, Yuanya's arms had already completely penetrated the horned python's body, which was the so-called 3 inches of the horned python's body. However, seeing that he was about to be smashed to the ground by the horned python, Yuanya didn't dare to delay. He hurriedly pulled his arms out of the horned python's body and his entire body shot out from the horned python's neck. Boom! The horned python's head hit the ground and blood splattered everywhere. Not only was blood flowing out from the 2 bloody holes in its neck, even the sharp edges of the boulder had pierced the python's head. Even though the horned python was injured, it didn't let go of the chance to attack Yuanya. The python's tail that was coiled on the ground stood up again and slammed straight towards Xiaohua, who had just stabilized himself. With another loud bang, the python's tail smashed down and actually created a shockwave that sent the gravel flying. Yuan Ye's figure dodged to the side in the nick of time. Sigh. Another group of demons sighed in unison. It wasn't clear whether they were sighing because Yuan Ye couldn't injure the horned python or because the horned python couldn't kill Yuan Ye. However, all of the demons could see that even if Yuan Ye could injure the horned python's enormous body wouldn't give Yuan Ye a chance to do so. The possibility of Yuan Ye being killed in this battle was too high. Just as these demons had this thought, the scene before their eyes almost caused their eyeballs to fall out of their sockets. Yuan Ye had just dodged the python's tail when he suddenly pounced towards it. His two large hands were once again inserted into the python's tail like a pitchfork. Not only that, Yuan Ye stood firmly on the ground and suddenly raised his arms. Like a dancing snake, he actually shook the horned python's enormous body into the air. The crowd of demons fell into a deathly silence at first. Then, the entire arena erupted into cries of disbelief. How is this possible? This human? How can this human be so strong? Roar! The horned python's body was shaken into the air by Yuan Ye. It roared and twisted, trying its best to turn its head and pounce towards Yuan Ye. However, Yuan Ye's arms had already pierced deeply into the python's tail. Even though he couldn't stand firmly on the ground due to the horned python's immense struggle and was staggering, his arms were as strong as cast iron. They continuously rolled the python's body and forced the horned python to not turn its head. The horned python roared. With a forceful turn, its body almost split into two as it pounced towards Yuan Ye. Yuan Ye's eyes widened. He wasn't afraid at all. Instead, he took a slight step and swung his arms in the direction of the horned python's charge. Like swinging a noodle, he smashed the horned python's enormous body onto the ground. There were naturally huge rocks and sharp spikes on the ground. In an instant, the python's entire body was covered in blood. Then Yuan Ye decided to go all the way. Just like that, he tossed the horned python left and right with all his might. In less than half a meal's worth of time, the horned python was already powerless and motionless, allowing Yuan Ye to trample on it as he wished. Go! Seeing that the horned python's body was badly mutilated, Yuan Ye shouted and swung his arm. Boom! The horned python flew across half of the arena and smashed into the stone wall. Just like when Yuan Ye first entered the arena, the horned python fell limply under the stone wall. Green blood flowed out. Although it wasn't dead, it no longer had the strength to move. Baxia wins. Ma Jinfeng naturally stood high up in the air above the arena. When he saw how Yuan Ye defeated the horned python so easily, a strange look appeared in his eyes. However, he still landed calmly. With a wave of his hand, he sent Yuan Ye, who was covered in blood, to the entrance of the cave. Chapter 39-35. Sigh. The crowd of monsters sighed. After all, only a few believed that Yuan Ye could win. Suddenly, another monster cried out, No, this Baxia is so strong. How could it be a level 4 gladiator beast? If it was level 5 or level 6, I would believe it. North Sea Dragon Palace. You have to give us an explanation. Sorry. Ma Yingfeng said indifferently, there's nothing to explain. It's recorded in my North Sea Dragon Palace's strategy book. No. The monsters who lost the bet were dissatisfied. Ma Yingfeng snorted coldly. If you think Baxia isn't a level 4 gladiator beast, you can bet on him. If you win, my Yazi Gladiator Arena will compensate you. Now that you have no choice, how can you blame my Yazi Gladiator Arena? All of the demons were speechless. However, looking at the expressions of these demons, they were still somewhat indignant. Why would Xiaohua care about these monsters? He happily got up and was about to walk to the side door, but at this moment, Ma Yingfeng said, If fellow immortals are unwilling, then watch the next battle. Perhaps fellow immortals will have another surprise. As he spoke, Ma Yingfeng raised his hand and pointed. Oh! A loud and clear lion's roar came from the hole where Yuan Ye had disappeared, and from another hole, a small cage flew out. When Xiaohua saw the demonic beast in the cage, he couldn't help but be stunned. The cage was extremely small, even smaller than the one Yuan Ye was in. Inside the cage, there was a dwarf that was only 3 feet tall lying on the ground. Wasn't this the heavenly river water tribe that Xiao Hua saw in the immortal town? At that moment, the dwarf was naked and covered in scales. Some of the scales had been peeled off, and some of them were damaged and blood-stained. There was a tear on his right arm, and the top of his head, which was originally covered in armor, was now empty. A pair of branches that looked like dragon horns had poked out. However, a small part of the dragon horns was broken, and there were bloodstains on them. Looking at the dwarf's lower body, other than the 2 legs that were similar to dragon claws, a dragon tail poked out from behind him. Jiang Sheng. Xiao Hua stopped and looked at the arena in shock. He thought to himself, "Isn't he the dragon general of the heavenly abode river? How did it fall into the hands of the North Sea Dragon Palace?" However, after thinking about it for a while, he understood that the water tribe of the Dongtian River was stirring up trouble everywhere. They wanted to incite internal strife in the Dragon Palace of the 4 Seas so that they could benefit from it. However, since they were stirring up trouble, it was inevitable that they would give themselves away. It was not too strange that Jiang Sheng was captured by the North Sea Dragon Palace. However, seeing Jiang Sheng in such a miserable state, and thinking back to the battle he had with him that day, Xiao Hua felt very uncomfortable in his heart. If Jiang Sheng flooded Longevity Town, Xiao Hua should hate Jiang Sheng. But if he put himself in Jiang Sheng's shoes, wouldn't that dragon girl named Jiang Hong be 10,000 times more important than the people of Longevity Town? In particular, just a moment ago, when Yuan Ye was in danger, Xiao Hua almost wanted to take action. That feeling of guilt had just disappeared because of Yuan Ye's victory. Therefore, Xiao Hua understood Jiang Sheng's feelings very well at that time, so it was difficult for him to feel any disgust. Since he is a hero, killing him or cutting him up is just a word. Why do you have to humiliate him like this? Xiao Hua stood on the spot and looked at the introduction of Ma Jinfeng. He couldn't help but sneer. The actions of the North Sea Dragon Palace are really disappointing. In the arena, Ma Jinfeng raised his hand and pointed at Jiang Sheng. He sneered and said, "This is a remnant of the Dongtian River, named Jiang Sheng. He was born from the mating of the dragon race and the human race, which is the commonly seen dragon man. This dragon man has boundless strength, and in my Yazi arena he is classified as a Class 5 monster beast. This guy killed the dragon general of the North Sea Dragon Palace and violated the dragon law of the North Sea Dragon Palace. However, considering that he has the bloodline of the dragon race, we gave him a special favor and did not kill him immediately. We allowed him to fight in the arena to atone for his crime. This fire lion, there is no need for this old man to say more. You can bet on it yourself." Perhaps it was because the crowd of monsters was a little agitated, or perhaps it was because Ma Jinfeng wanted Jiang Sheng to die earlier, but the introduction of this battle was especially short. Xiao Hua didn't move anymore. The crowd of monsters had already finished placing their bets. In the arena, 2 cages had already been opened. Jiang Sheng was thrown to the ground. In the other cage, a fire lion with flickering flames around its body leaped into the air vigorously. It rushed out from the huge rocks and pounced towards Jiang Sheng. "Bite him to death, bite him to death." Seeing Jiang Sheng covered in wounds, how could the monsters not know that the North Sea Dragon Palace was humiliating Jiang Sheng? Jiang Sheng was definitely going to die in this arena? They had already placed their sea crystals on the fire line. Seeing Jiang Sheng's short body fall to the ground, the fire lion pounced towards him crazily. The monsters all shouted loudly, "Woo!" Before the fire lion pounced, it had already spat out scarlet flames from its mouth and enveloped Jiang Sheng. "Ayo, ayo!" Jiang Sheng cried out loudly. He rolled on the ground, trying to extinguish the flames. However, when the fire lion opened its bloody mouth and bit towards Jiang Sheng, the flames on Jiang Sheng's body still hadn't been extinguished. Roar! Seeing that he was about to be bitten into 2, Jiang Sheng also roared loudly. He jumped up from the ground in extreme madness and pounced towards the fire lion. He grew 2 hands and bit the fire lion. The battle between Jiang Sheng and the fire lion was different from the battle between Yuan Ye and the horned python. The two monsters were completely close to each other. Not only was the fire lion's body torn by Jiang Sheng's bare hands, but Jiang Sheng's body was also torn by the fire lion's iron claws. Xiao Hua's gaze was attracted by this unusually bloody and intense battle. He was worried for his former opponent. This fire lion was very powerful. If Jiang Sheng wasn't careful, he would be torn apart by the fire lion. The fire lion roared. It waved its left claw like a slap and slapped Jiang Sheng to the ground. Then, it pounced forward and stepped on Jiang Sheng's chest with its right claw. Peng! Just as the fire lion was about to pounce, Jiang Sheng lifted his leg and kicked the fire lion's abdomen. Then, Jiang Sheng's dragon tail suddenly swung, and the fire lion's body was thrown high into the sky. Before the fire lion could stabilize its body, Jiang Sheng suddenly pounced on it. Similar to how Yuan Ye dealt with the horned python, Jiang Sheng immediately plunged his hands into the fire lion's neck. Then, with a pew sound, his dragon tail directly stabbed into the fire lion's eyes. Ayo ayo! The fire lion screamed and rolled on the ground. However, Jiang Sheng hugged the fire lion's neck tightly and didn't let go. In just half a cup of tea's time, the fire lion's aura disappeared. It was strangled to death by Jiang Sheng. Jiang Sheng coldly raised his head and grabbed the fire lion. Woo! A gust of wind blew and the fire lion's corpse flew toward Si Feng above the blood clouds. How dare you! Si Feng coldly rebuked. He lifted his hand and pointed. Several blue streams of water appeared out of thin air and trapped Jiang Sheng. Those streams of water quickly flowed deep into Jiang Sheng's body. Not only were his scales torn off, even more blood flowed out from his wounds. Jiang Sheng rolled on the ground in pain. However, he still clenched his teeth and fiercely glared at Si Feng. Damn it! Xiao Hua and Jiang Sheng could be considered to have gotten to know each other through fighting. Now, they felt like heroes cherishing heroes. However, just as Xiao Hua angrily cursed, he suddenly realized that it had been a long time since the end of Yuan Ye's battle. Why hasn't Yuan Ye returned? Moreover, the green-robed Xiao Hua didn't make any movements. Xiao Hua felt that something was wrong and hastily walked to the side door. Sure enough, the smiling Shen Kong was already waiting there with the heaven and earth bracelet in his hand. Seeing Xiao Hua walk over, he smiled and waved the heaven and earth bracelet in his hand and said, "Immortal friend, why did you only come now? This old man thought that you had forgotten about the bet." "Hee, not at all, not at all," Xiao Hua said with a smile. The battles in the Yazi Gladiator Arena were really too exciting. I took a few more glances and almost forgot about it. Hearing Xiao Hua's words, a trace of contempt flashed through Shen Kong's eyes. He handed the heaven and earth bracelet to Xiao Hua and said, "This is the agreement between Immortal Friend and my North Sea Dragon Palace. 20% of the bet is Immortal Friends." Xiao Hua took the heaven and earth bracelet and released a slightly weak divine sense. After taking a look, he was so surprised that his eyes narrowed. He cried out, "Is it so much? Hee, Bashia's strength is a little beyond our expectations. That's why almost all of our fellow immortals have placed their bets on the horned python. Just 20% of the bets is already shocking enough." Shen Kong's smile was still the same as before. He said, "However, this is only 20%. Immortal friend, have you thought of earning more?" "Oh? Immortal friend Xian, what do you mean?" Xiao Hua put the heaven and earth bracelet into his bosom. He looked behind Shen Kong and asked curiously, "Where's Ai's disciple? Why hasn't he come out yet?" Don't worry," Shen Kong said in a low voice. "Bashia's fine now. However, this old man wants to discuss something with you, so he hasn't come out yet." "Oh, what does Immortal Friend want to say?" Xiao Hua rolled his eyes and asked in a low voice. Shen Kong stared into Xiao Hua's eyes and probed, "Immortal Friend, have you thought of letting Baxia participate in another battle?" Xiao Hua asked curiously. Ai's disciple has already participated in the last battle. His agreement with the North Sea Dragon Palace has ended. Immortal Friend, you should remove the warrior slave seal for Ai's disciple and return his freedom. Hee, this old man didn't say that he wouldn't remove the warrior slave seal for Baxia. This old man just wants to suggest that immortal friend let him participate in another battle. Could it be that immortal friend didn't see it? Until now, no immortal friend has participated in the battle. If Bashia's disciple can participate, he'll definitely earn a lot of sea crystals. Xiaohua shook his head and said, "My disciple has already been injured in the previous battle. If he participates in another battle, won't he die here?" Immortal friend, don't you think you can earn more sea crystals if you participate in another battle? Xian Kong asked with a smile. Oh no. I still have to rely on this disciple to earn more origin stones in the future. Xiaohua waved his hand and objected. Xian Kong's expression changed and he said coldly, "Actually, this old man doesn't want to fall out with immortal friend. I want to discuss this properly. However, since immortal friend refuses a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit, this old man will just tell you directly." "Tell me what?" Xiaohua said coldly. Chapter 39-36. Baxia 4, 7, 8, 8, 6, 9 was previously recorded as a Class 4 demon beast, but his strength has now reached Class 5. Previously, when he participated in the battle as a Class 4 demon beast, it caused unfairness in my Yazi Gladiator Arena. Not only did the spectators have complaints about my Yazi Gladiator Arena, but even my master felt that it was inappropriate. Therefore, this old man has already told Baxia 4, 7, 8, 6, 9 that he must participate in another battle between Class 5 demon beasts before he can leave the gladiator arena. "Fellow immortal Xian." Xiaohua smiled and said, "This is your Yazi gladiator arena going back on its word." Xian Kong shrugged his shoulder that was exposed outside the tortoise shell and said, "It's not going back on my word. It's just that you didn't clearly state Baxia 4, 7, 8, 6, 9's true strength." "What did my foolish disciple say?" Xiaohua understood that with Xian Kong's eloquence, he must have deceived and coaxed Yuanya like before. Yuanya, in order not to implicate Xiaohua, would definitely agree. Sure enough, Xian Kong smiled and said, "Baxia 4, 7, 8, 6, 9 has already agreed. In fact, this old man didn't need to inform you. However, this old man feels that since you're Baxia 4, 8, 8, 6, 9's master, this old man should inform you." "That's good." Xiaohua thought for a moment and said, "But before the battle, you have to remove the 10,000 kill order and my disciple's slave warrior seal." Xian Kong thought for a moment and shook his head slightly. "This old man can't promise you. All demon beasts can only remove the slave warrior seal when they leave the gladiator arena." "Don't worry," Xiaohua said again. "This is the first condition. I have a second condition." Xian Kong didn't find it strange at all. He seemed to have expected Xiaohua to say this. He just shook his head slightly and said, "Fellow immortal, sometimes it's better not to be too greedy." "This..." Xiaohua hesitated slightly. His eyes turned slightly and he said with a smile, "Since fellow immortal Xian Kong said so, then, can I take 20% more of the bet? 20% is impossible." Xian Kong shook his head, "But seeing that there are some misunderstandings between us, my Yazi Gladiator Arena can give you 5% of the bet." 5%? That's too little. Xiaohua pretended to hesitate. His real purpose was to let Xian Kong remove Yuan Ye's warrior slave seal first. When he saw that Xiaohua was unwilling, Xian Kong waved his hand and said, "How about this? Both of us will take a step back. This old man agrees to remove the 10,000 kill command right now, and at the same time, I'll remove Baxia's 4, 7, 8, 8, 6, and 9 warrior slave seals. You only have to take 5% more. How about it?" "All right." Xiaohua seemed to be in pain as he helplessly nodded. Xian Kong said with a smile, "That's the right decision, fellow immortal. Isn't there a saying in the human race that goes, a wise man submits to circumstances? That way, it'll be easier for both of us. And call my disciple over." Xiaohua couldn't sense the aura of the green-robed Xiaohua, so he urged Xian Kong. "Sure." Xian Kong turned around, and with a wave of his finger, Yuanya appeared in the distance. Meanwhile, Xiaohua also appeared in Xiaohua's senses. In an instant, Xiaohua understood Xiaohua's intentions, and he returned to the arena. Xiaohua said, "You've already agreed?" "Yes, master." Yuanya replied, "Disciple doesn't want to implicate master. It's just a battle, so disciple will return in a moment." "Alright." Xiaohua nodded. "Since you've already decided, master can't say anything else. Go ahead and attack, there's no need to hold back." Disciple understands." Yuanya seemed to understand but didn't. "Before the battle, let fellow immortal Xian remove your warrior slave's seal first." Xiaohua said. "Alright." Yuanya took a step forward and replied. Xian Kong waved the warrior slave seal, and the Yazi on the warrior slave seal spat out a stream of blood energy. The images of Xiaohua and Yuanya in the bronze mirror slowly disappeared. Then, Xian Kong opened his mouth again, and a mouthful of demonic energy landed on the warrior slave seal. The warrior slave seal emitted a dazzling brilliance, and it rushed into the air and transformed into a Yazi. Xian Kong calmly took out a thumb-sized dragon seal from his bosom, and with a flick of his finger, the dragon seal landed in the Yazi's mouth. Pooh! The Yazi spat out a cluster of blood light that landed on Yuanya, and then the entire blood light was sucked back into the Yazi's mouth. Buzz buzz. The Yazi's body trembled, and the ferocious beast's mouth spat out a ferocious blood demon head. This demon head spun in the air for a moment, and then it slowly shrank, transforming into a drop of blood that landed in front of Yuanya. Xiaohua raised his hand, and the drop of blood landed in his hand. Xiaohua carefully looked at it, and then he said with a smile, "Very good. Disciple, you can go now." "Yes, master." Yuanya turned around without hesitation and walked towards the entrance of the cave. This old man congratulates fellow immortal on returning with a fruitful journey. Xian Kong looked at Xiaohua, and cupped his hands with a fake smile. I definitely will. Many thanks to fellow immortal Xian for giving I this opportunity." Xiaohua turned around and walked towards the arena. The true Samadhi fire in his hand flashed, and the drop of blood was burned into a wisp of smoke. Looking at Xiaohua's back as he walked into the arena, Xian Kong smiled coldly. He had been in charge of the Yazi auction house for who knows how many years, and he had seen countless humans and monsters. How could he not know the reason why Xiao Jian took Yuanya away from the Baxia arena that day? When Xiaohua returned to the arena, everything in front of him made him have mixed feelings. Because the one in the arena at this moment was still Jiang Sheng. The one fighting against him was a killer whale. This killer whale was huge, and it had the head of a tiger and the body of a whale. It was incomparably ferocious, and it was much more powerful than the fire lion from before. When Xiaohua sat down on the chair, Jiang Sheng had already been smashed onto a rock by the huge whale. Although it was not to the extent that his flesh was smashed and his bones broken, looking at the blood gushing out from the corner of Jiang Sheng's mouth, Xiaohua knew that Jiang Sheng was seriously injured. Roar! Just as Xiaohua was biting his lips, Jiang Sheng let out an angry roar. His entire body flashed with a golden luster, and his body that was only 3 feet tall abruptly grew in size. However, he only grew to about 10 feet before stopping. At this moment, Jiang Sheng was no longer in his human form, but in the form of a small dragon covered in scales. Jiang Sheng, who had transformed into a dragon, roared and pounced towards the killer whale. His claws and fists continuously hit the killer whale's head, and in a moment, the killer whale was stunned. Then, Jiang Sheng's claws really pierced into the killer whale's cheeks, and with the strength of his arms, the entire killer whale was lifted up from the ground by Jiang Sheng. "Go to hell!" Jiang Sheng shouted. The huge killer whale flew out from his hand with a woo, and rushed towards the arena's wall. Ping! A loud sound rang out, and the entire arena shook. Damn it, how can this shorty have so much strength? All the demons were extremely shocked. After all, demons were known for their physical bodies, but Jiang Sheng's strength still exceeded their imagination. Swoosh! Without waiting for Jiang Sheng to make another move, Ma Yingfeng, who was standing on the blood cloud, already used a cage to imprison Jiang Sheng and sent him into the cave. No! Another demon shouted, How can this dragon man be so powerful? Your Yazi Arena's actions are too unfair. He clearly has the strength of a level 9 fighting beast, but you insist on treating him as a level 5. Hee, how can there be absolute fairness in this world? How can there be absolute certainty in this world? Ma Yingfeng sneered and said, if I let you all see it accurately, wouldn't this old man have to drink the northwest wind? Ma Yingfeng was naturally not as tactful as Xian Kong, and these words made all the demons unhappy. The entire gladiator arena was in an uproar. At this moment, Xian Kong hurriedly revealed himself in midair, and said with a smile, fellow immortals, General Ma Yingfeng is actually right. Think about it, everything in this world can be seen clearly, so how can there be love and hatred? How can this little dragon man from Heavenly Abode River betray us and assassinate the general of our North Sea Dragon Palace? It's because the matters in this world are not controlled by us demons, so there are many interesting things in this world. However, since fellow immortals have come to my Yazi Arena to watch the fights, then I will try my best to arrange everything in a fair manner. Xian Kong looked around, and everywhere he looked, the noise was reduced. Xian Kong was very satisfied and said, for example, that Baxia from before, fellow immortals all feel that he might have the strength of a level 5 fighting beast, so this old man has already discussed with him, and let him fight another round to satisfy fellow immortals. Good. The demons all cheered loudly, this is true fairness, fellow immortal Xian has done well. Of course, there's also that remaining evil from Heavenly Abode River. Fellow immortals all feel that he is quite strong, so this old man will let him fight another round to satisfy fellow immortals. Good. The demons didn't expect Xian Kong's words to be the same as not saying anything, but they also felt that this was very fair, so they all cheered loudly. Xian Kong smiled faintly, since that's the case, fellow immortals, please prepare yourselves. The next fight will begin immediately. With that, Xian Kong's figure disappeared, and Ma Yingfeng stood on the blood cloud with a puzzled expression. A moment later, a swordfish swam over from the distance and landed in front of Ma Yingfeng. Ma Yingfeng reached out with his hand, and the swordfish turned into a wave and disappeared from his hand. Ma Yingfeng frowned, but he soon relaxed, and a thoughtful look flashed in his eyes. Several drumbeats sounded, and the entire arena flashed with a layer of blood-red light. 2 holes appeared on the stone wall as usual, but when the holes appeared, there was no beast roar coming from inside. When the 2 cages flew out, the demons were stunned, and even Xiaohua was stunned on the spot. The 2 cages weren't big, and the one on the left was even smaller. Inside it was Jiang Xing who had just left the arena. However, at this moment, Jiang Xing had already returned to his original size. Furthermore, he was holding a halberd in his hand. In particular, Jiang Sheng's eyes were extremely bright and blood-red. He didn't care that he was covered in blood, and he coldly stared at Ma Yingfeng on the blood cloud. As for the other cage, it was Yuan Ye who was wearing a Taoist robe. At this moment, Yuan Ye was just like Yuan Ye who had entered the side door. He had a Qinkuan bag on him, and he held a pair of demonic hammers in his hands. Chapter 39-37. Xiaohua was dumbstruck as he looked at the man and beast. He had never expected the Yazi Gladiator Arena to have such a plan. They actually wanted Yuan Ye to fight Jiang Xing. Moreover, he had even returned Jiang Xing and Yuan Ye's weapons to them and released their cultivation that had been sealed. This was a life-and-death battle. In this battle, either Yuan Ye or Jiang Xing would die. Based on Xiaohua's understanding of the man and beast, the possibility of Yuan Ye dying was higher. Of course, Jiang Xing had already fought 2 battles in a row and was on the verge of exhaustion. Yuan Ye might not die in Jiang Xing's hands. But the problem was, what if Yuan Ye killed Jiang Xing? How would Yuan Ye face the water tribe of the Paradise River? How would Yuan Ye face Dragon Lady Jiang Hong? How would Yuan Ye explain to Lu Yi? Of course, it was still too early to consider the matter between Lu Yi and Jiang Hong. However, Xiaohua knew that as long as Yuan Ye fought with Jiang Xing, his fortune gate and the Paradise River would develop karma that he didn't want to see. The crowd of demon race was equally shocked when they saw a human and a demon come out. These two gladiator beasts were also very powerful. Although it seemed that Yuanya was slightly weaker, it was just as Xiaohua thought. At this time, the strength of the two gladiator beasts was really comparable. All the demon race could not make a decision arbitrarily. Damn it! Xian Kong, you're too cunning. A demonic beast expert howled. What choice do you want me to make? Ha! Xian Kong's laughter resounded from a corner of the arena. Fellow immortals, weren't you complaining about the unfairness? This old man has now placed fairness in front of you. Why are you complaining about this old man? Everyone hurry up and place your bets. The exciting battle is about to begin. This old man can't wait to see if the human race is stronger or the demonic beast race is stronger. Xiaohua narrowed his eyes and coldly looked at the arena. Looking at the beasts who were placing their bets in a mess, a cold light flashed in his eyes. Dong dong. Along with the beating of the war drums, Ma Yingfeng waved his hand and opened Yuan Ye's and Jiang Xing's cages. As soon as the man and the beast rushed out of the cages, they immediately activated their flying techniques and rushed towards each other. Seeing that a tragedy was about to happen, a thunderous roar came from the arena. Ma Yingfeng, hand over your life. As this voice spread out, a ray of sword light that was as bright as thunder appeared. The moment this sword light appeared, there was no other light in the arena. All the demons and humans closed their eyes under this sword light. Within the dazzling sword light, the sword chi that could kill all living things instantly filled the entire arena. Most of the demon race members were so frightened that they trembled all over. As for the few demon race experts who were sitting high up, their demon chi naturally surged as they tried their best to protect their bodies from this unparalleled sword chi. Swoosh! The sword light flashed and landed on the demon array in the center of the arena. Thousands of demon runes scurried around like frightened tadpoles, but at the same time, all the demon runes were neatly cut in half by the sword light. What was special was that the sword chi didn't have much energy left after cutting through the demon runes. It continued to fly towards Ma Yingfeng, who was standing on the blood cloud. At this moment, Ma Yingfeng was the same as all the other demon race members. His eyes were blinded by the sword chi and his eyes were slightly closed. Just as he released his origin sense, the sword chi had already landed on his head. How is this possible? When did I offend such a powerful opponent? Hearing this, Ma Yingfeng lost all his courage. Under the shroud of the sword energy, the sword intent of the flying sword was like the heavens pressing down. Not to mention Ma Yingfeng's monster body, even a giant mountain peak would be split in half by this sword intent. Ma Yingfeng's demon body violently trembled under this sword chi. He was extremely shocked and couldn't help but cry out, "General Ao, don't move." Seeing that the sword chi was about to fall, Ma Yingfeng had nowhere to hide. Suddenly, an extremely long crutch stretched out from the stone wall, and Xian Kong's voice came. Dong. With a light sound, Ma Yingfeng was sent flying by the crutch. Boom! The flying sword fell. Not only was Xian Kong's crutch cut in half, but the ground of the entire arena, including the giant rocks and spikes, were also split by the flying sword. A sword mark of more than 100 feet appeared in an instant. Disciple, don't move. It's master. Yuan Ye's figure was naturally sent flying by the sword chi. Just as he was surprised, Xiaohua's voice sounded. Yuan Ye immediately calmed down. Then his body tightened. When he opened his eyes again, his figure was already inside the Kunlun immortal realm. This shocking sword was naturally done by the Confucian cultivator Xiaohua. This was also the first time Xiaohua used it after his sword Dao reached the Deshang level. He didn't expect the power to be so terrifying. After putting away Yuan Ye, Xiaohua's heart moved, and his mind wrapped around Jiang Xing. Although Jiang Xing was forced back by the sword chi, he stubbornly urged his demonic aura with all his strength. His demonic body once again expanded, wanting to block the sword light. Xiaohua's mind was naturally firmly blocked by Jiang Xing. Xiaohua hurriedly used the monster language to whisper, "Jiang Xing, this old man is an old friend of Jiang Che and Jiang Peng. At the same time, I also know Jiang Hong. They asked me to save you." As soon as he heard Xiaohua say so many names, Jiang Xing immediately stopped resisting. However, he was still somewhat hesitant and struggling. After all, he already felt the strange force around him. He knew that as long as he fell into it, he would have no power to struggle. Everything would be handed over to this person. Damn it! Seeing that Jiang Xing was still moving, Xiaohua was anxious. If you want to die, this old man will leave now. Jiang Xing was helpless and could only stop struggling. Then he felt his body fly up. Then he saw light and shadow flash. He was actually in a celestial mountain, and in front of him was the human who had just appeared in the arena like him. Jiang Xing was greatly alarmed. He wanted to move again, yet he couldn't. No matter how much strength he used to struggle, he couldn't even budge an inch. However, Yuanya glanced at him indifferently and didn't pay attention to him at all. He walked towards a place on the mountain peak. Where is this? Jiang Xing was slightly relieved in his heart, yet a cloud of doubt arose. It was also the moment Jiang Xing resisted that several powerful origin senses swept past from all around the arena and descended onto Xiaohua. Clouds and rosy clouds surged around Xiaohua's body, and he shouted loudly, "This is a personal grudge between this old man and Yuan Jinfeng. It has nothing to do with fellow immortals." As he spoke, Xiaohua raised his hand again. Several sword lights condensed in his hand, and he shouted loudly, "Vile creature, when this old man saw that you were injured earlier, I pitied you in my heart and saved you. Then I placed you in this old man's home. However, you actually took advantage of the time when this old man left home to swallow my chick and copulate with the female pufferfish I raised. The most infuriating thing is that you actually abandoned a group of pufferfish that were crying piteously for food and fled. If this old man doesn't take your life today, how can I face the female pufferfish that died under the butcher's knife?" As he spoke, the murderous sword light from before appeared once more. Even though the demon race experts weren't afraid of Xiaohua's divine ability, when they heard that it was a personal grudge between Xiaohua and Yuan Jinfeng, and they heard Xiaohua speak clearly about the chick and the female pufferfish, they acted like they were serious and hurriedly withdrew their origin senses and hid at the side. However, Xian Kong and Yuan Jinfeng were puzzled when these words entered their ears. Xian Kong looked at Yuan Jinfeng with surprise, but when his gaze descended onto Yuan Jinfeng's dazed face, he suddenly came to an understanding and recalled what the chick and female pufferfish Xiaohua spoke of were in the eyes of humans. At the same time that Xian Kong thought of this, Yuan Jinfeng naturally came to an understanding as well, and his face instantly turned extremely livid. Wait. At the same time that Xian Kong recovered from his shock, he hurriedly looked towards the other areas of the arena, and Yuan Ya and Jiang Xing had vanished a long time ago. Xian Kong hurriedly released his origin sense, but unfortunately, before he could see Xiaohua's face, another brilliant sword light appeared. Xian Kong was greatly shocked and hurriedly cried out, "Second Prince?" Actually, there was utterly no need for Xian Kong to shout. At the same time that the sword light appeared, a strand of origin sense swept out from the arena, and a proud and furious voice drifted through the entire arena. "Who dares to cause trouble in this king's arena?" However, this voice was still too late. The sword light shot into the sky, and a wave of rumbling resounded. The demon formation at the entrance that everyone had entered through was slashed apart by the sword light, and the group of demon runes were split into two. Along with a wisp of starlight and the smell of the ocean that poured into the arena, Xiaohua's figure transformed into a strand of watery light that vanished at the flaw of the demon formation. At the same time that Xiaohua's figure swayed, the experts of the demon race that sat high above in the distance had recovered from their shock as well. They practically swung their arms at the exact same time, and their claws tore through space and instantly descended towards the spot where Xiaohua stood just a moment ago. Unfortunately, only strands of water vapor drifted through the air, and they weren't even able to capture a single strand of Xiaohua's hair. Damn it. The experts of the demon race were slightly embarrassed and furious. It wasn't just because Xiaohua had fled right before their eyes, but because Xiaohua was a human while they were demons. When had the human race ever acted so arrogantly before the demon race? Xiaohua's escape wasn't just Xiaohua's problem, it was the human race's provocation towards the demon race. Woo! Strands of demon aura soared into the sky as the figures of several great demons expanded, preparing to chase after Xiaohua. At this moment, a huge dragon flew out from the arena. On that ferocious dragon head, a pair of protruding dragon eyes were spewing out sparks, and the dragon's roaming body emitted an aura that caused the demons to feel dizzy. Seeing the huge dragon flying over, the few great demons didn't dare to snatch and hastily dodged. However, with a loud bang, the huge dragon crashed into the fissure that Xiaohua had just escaped from, creating a hole that was tens of meters in size. In the blink of an eye, the huge dragon had already disappeared by riding on clouds. Chase. As soon as the huge dragon left, the few great demons couldn't bear it any longer. They released their Yuan Shen and rode on demon clouds to chase after the dragon. There was a deathly silence in the arena. For a moment, the entire arena was even more heated than before. After the demonic array of the arena was split open by Xiaohua and the gate was broken by the dragon, the demonic array of the entire arena was completely destroyed. All the demonic beasts flew up from their seats and rushed towards the huge gap. While flying, the demonic beasts shouted, "Interesting! Interesting!" Chapter 39-38. Haha, there's actually a human who dares to cause trouble in the North Sea Dragon Palace's arena. He must be tired of living. No, that's not right. It's because Ma Yingfeng offended this human. Didn't you hear? He had an affair with his female porpoise and even abandoned it. But then again, what is this female porpoise? Why haven't I heard of it? Is it an extremely powerful demonic beast or an extremely charming demonic beast? Who knows? It's probably a rare demonic beast. Otherwise, why would he chase him all the way to the arena? He even dares to offend the second prince of the North Sea Dragon Palace? It should be. This human sword technique is so high. His demonic beast must be extremely rare too. According to the humans, Ma Yingfeng must have eaten a bear's heart and leopard's guts. In the distance, Ma Yingfeng, who had just flown up from the ground, was about to say something to Xian Kong. When he heard the discussion, his face became even more ashen. He opened his mouth, wanting to argue, but he didn't know what to say. As for Xian Kong, he couldn't hide the smile on his face. However, when he saw all the demonic beasts flying out of the hole, he immediately thought of something and hurriedly called out, "Fellow immortals." However, Xian Kong only said these two words before he shut his mouth dejectedly. If these demonic beasts didn't leave, Xian Kong could easily find out who left the arena. There weren't many humans in the Yazi arena. If he investigated carefully, he would be able to find out who gave the auction hall's certificate to Xiaohua. Although there were portraits of Xiao Jian and Yuan Ya in the North Sea Dragon Palace's battle strategy, as well as Yuan Ya's record in the Baxia arena, these weren't enough for Xian Kong to find the power behind Xiaohua. Now, both the demonic beasts and humans had left. How could Xian Kong find out? However, the huge hole in the arena was personally opened by the second prince of the North Sea Dragon Palace. Xian Kong really wanted to cry but had no tears. A group of demonic beasts chased out of the arena. When they saw the second prince of the Dragon Palace flying towards the North Sea, they were all surprised. After all, the troublemaker could fly anywhere, but why did he fly to the North Sea? The North Sea was the lair of the second prince of the North Sea Dragon Palace. There was no way he could escape from the second prince. Don't tell me. Something must be wrong if something was amiss. The demons thought quickly and seemed to have thought of something. Hence, numerous strands of primordial consciousness swept out. However, when their primordial consciousness swept past the second prince, it continued forward, forward, and forward. There was only the boundless sea in front of them. Where was that wretched-looking human? Roar! Just as the demons were wondering what was going on, the second prince raised his head and roared. His dragon body shrunk by half, and he dove into the North Sea. How is that possible? That human actually dove into the water? Could it be that he thinks he can hide from the dragons in the water? Although the demons were wary of the dragon clan, they were not afraid of them. After pondering for a moment, they urged the demon cloud to increase their flying speed. They either dove into the sea to chase after the dragon clan or chased above the sea surface. However, in the time it took to brew a cup of tea, buzz buzz, the continuous sound of tsunamis came from the sea. Then, a huge wave rushed out from the sea. The second prince's huge dragon body soared into the sky. Roar roar. The dragon's roar resounded for thousands of miles. The layers of dark clouds in the sky were torn apart by the dragon's roar, and rays of sunlight shone through the clouds. No way! The demons chasing after the second prince were shocked. Could it be that the human actually escaped the second prince's primordial consciousness? That human is actually the literary sage of Confucianism? The second prince of the dragon palace rushed into the sky. The huge dragon body shrunk rapidly and gradually transformed into a human form. The second prince was wearing a golden chainmail and a purple gold crown on his head. Above the ferocious dragon head, a pair of huge dragon eyes were bloodshot. Roar! The second prince of the dragon palace turned around. His eyes were like lightning. He opened his mouth and roared to the surroundings. Within 100 miles, the winds and clouds were swirling. Several experts of the demon clan hurriedly dodged. Pa pa pa! A series of explosions came from the surface of the experts of the demon clan. Within 100 miles, whether it was in the air or at the bottom of the sea, countless explosions came one after another. It was more intense than pouring cold water into a pot of oil. While the experts of the demon clan were dodging, their hearts were as clear as a mirror. The second prince of the dragon palace must have lost the human, and he must have lost him long ago. Otherwise, the dragon's roar would have made him appear within 100 miles. Just as the demons were thinking, a blurry human figure suddenly appeared 100 miles away. However, it was like a mirage, disappearing in a flash. Damn it! The second prince of the dragon palace had already noticed it. He did not have time to transform into a dragon and chased after Xiaohua again. Hee, the dragon palace really has a lot of secret skills. In the distance, Xiaohua used the water escape technique to escape. At the same time, he used the secret skill of the Heavenly Abode River to cover his breath. That day, Jiang Che of the Heavenly Abode River hid beside Ao Zhan with this secret skill and was not discovered by Ao Zhan. Xiaohua was so far away from the second prince of the dragon palace. How could he be discovered? They just stood in 3 different directions of the cliff, blocking the way to the North Sea. It was as if they were preventing anyone from escaping from the cliff. At the same time, in the direction of Yuling Bay, squads of armored prawn soldiers and crab generals also flew over, gradually blocking the other direction of the cliff. The top of the cliff was very barren. Only a few thumb-sized plants grew tenaciously in the sea breeze. These plants grew out from the cracks of the large rocks. Apart from the dark green rust spots on the large rocks, there were also patches of grayish-white bird droppings. There was simply too much bird droppings, layer upon layer. The outermost layer of bird droppings was slowly lifted by the whistling sea wind, blown away by the wind. Among the rocks, there was a small stone house. This stone house was completely built from the rocks on the cliff. Although it was not piled up perfectly, it was enough to block the sea wind. However, the second prince's gaze did not linger on this stone house for long. He only glanced at it before sweeping past, landing on the cliff that was sheltered from the wind. However, at this moment, a black shadow suddenly flashed from the stone house. A woman with dark skin walked out from inside. This woman had a graceful figure. When she walked, her waist swayed like a willow tree, as if she had no bones. Although this woman was wearing clothes, the skin exposed outside of her clothes was clearly covered in scales. What was special was that although the woman's rough face had been transformed to the best of her ability, her scarlet tongue was still in the shape of a snake's forked tongue, involuntarily flicking here and there. There was almost no emotion in those pitch-black eyes. Wasn't this woman the snake demon that Xiaohua had seen in the sky above Yuling Bay last night? Chapter 39:39. Looking at the woman who had just walked out of the stone house, she immediately felt that something was wrong. She looked at the second prince, and the expression on her face changed drastically. She stood there in a daze, and her entire body trembled like a sieve. She almost fell to the ground. The snake species' natural submission to the dragon clan was involuntarily revealed. "Wife!" A weak voice sounded from inside the stone house. He seemed to have noticed the abnormality and hurriedly asked, "What happened to you?" "Nothing, nothing." "Husband, you must not come out." The woman's voice was a bit shrill and even had a hissing sound. However, in the midst of the woman's voice, there was a slightly dragging sound of footsteps. A man in strange clothes walked out of the stone house. This man had a head full of white hair and two big and lifeless eyes. His hands were stretched out in front of him, groping left and right. Obviously, he was blind. When the man touched the snake demon's trembling body, he said in surprise, "Wife, why are you so cold? Quickly put on these clothes." As he spoke, the blind man hurriedly took off his clothes and touched the woman, wanting to help her put on her clothes. "No need, husband." Facing the second prince of the Dragon Palace, the woman could not restrain her body from trembling. However, she still hurriedly shouted, "The wind is strong here. You quickly put on your clothes." The second prince of the Dragon Palace snorted and looked at the woman and the demon with extreme disgust. The dragon breath from his mouth and nose blew past, creating a fierce wind that blew away the clothes in the man's hands. "Such a strong wind," the old man said and hurriedly pulled the woman's arm. "Wife, quickly come back to hide from the wind." The snake demon did not dare to move. She hurriedly pushed the man and said, "Husband, don't worry about me, quickly go back." "Damned thing, you actually dare to conspire with a human?" The shrimp soldiers and crab soldiers in the distance had already approached. When Ma Yingfeng saw this, he unconsciously thought of Xiao Hua's slander in the arena and his heart burned with anger. He waved the trident in his hand and stabbed it towards the trembling snake spirit woman. The woman was shocked and wanted to dodge. However, when she saw the man still holding her arm, she gritted her teeth and tilted her body to block the man. Her body met the trident head-on. "Are you crazy?" At this moment, a lazy voice came from the place where the second prince of Dragon Palace was looking. "They are a loving couple. I envy them. Why do you want to break them apart? If you break them up, then I won't even have a neighbor." Following this voice, a huge black shadow rushed out from that place and blocked the three-pronged fork. When Ma Yingfeng saw that the three-pronged fork had wings that seemed to be cast from copper and iron, he couldn't help but be greatly alarmed. "Fellow immortal, where did you come from?" The second prince of Dragon Palace was not surprised. He looked at the origin of the wings with interest and asked, "When will we arrive at Yuling Bay? Why didn't I know that there was a powerful demon race expert on this cliff?" This old man came from where he came from, and in the future, I will return to the same place. I just stayed in Yuling Bay for a few years. I don't need to disturb so many fellow immortals, right? As he spoke, a demon race of more than 30 meters flew out from the foot of the mountain. This demon race was now in human form. On his head, which was several feet in size, there was a pair of bright eyes flashing with a sharp gaze. Two long eyebrows were slanted into his sideburns like sharp swords. His slightly bulging mouth and nose revealed faint red lips and white teeth. The demon's wings were surging with demon aura, and a pair of naked arms with bulging muscles could be vaguely seen amidst the demon aura. What was blocking the sharp weapons was the shadow of one of the demon's wings. "I'm Ao Jing, the second prince of North Sea Dragon Palace." The second prince pondered for a moment and cupped his hands. "How should I address you, fellow immortal?" "Oh, it's the second prince." The demon race suddenly realized and laughed. "I'm Feng Wu. As for where I come from, it's just an unknown place in the Thousand Demons' sacred realm. It's not comparable to the North Sea Dragon Palace. Let's not talk about it." "So it's fellow immortal Feng Wu." Ao Jing laughed. "I wonder if I'm lucky enough to invite fellow immortal to Yuling Palace for a chat?" I'm not going. Feng Wu flapped his wings and said, "If I wanted to go, I would have gone a few years ago. Since I'm not going, I can only disappoint the second prince. Since fellow immortal doesn't like to be disturbed, I won't mention this matter." Facing Feng Wu, an unfamiliar demon, Ao Jing acutely sensed that this demon of the phoenix bloodline was exceptionally powerful. He couldn't help but restrain his arrogance as he smiled and said, "However, this king would like to ask you, did you sense a human cultivator who concealed himself and passed by here just now?" "Hee, second prince really overestimates my strength." Feng Wu laughed. "How can I see a human race cultivator that even second prince can't catch up with?" Damn human race." At the mention of Xiao Hua, an inexplicable anger appeared on Ao Jing's face. He turned his head to look at the snake spirit and the old man in the stone house and said sternly, "Evil creature, what's the matter with you? If you don't explain clearly, I'll take your life right now." "Second prince, please spare my life." The snake spirit almost fell to the ground and said anxiously, "Su Lang is this lowly concubine's savior. This lowly concubine doesn't know how to repay him, so I want to accompany him for the rest of my life." "Lowly concubine? You're really good at saying the word human race." Ao Jing laughed sinisterly. "This man is just weak, how can he save you? Aren't you deceiving me? I'll let second prince know." The snake spirit didn't dare to be negligent and hurriedly said, "When Su Lang was young, this lowly concubine was chased by an enemy and turned into a small snake. It was winter at that time. This lowly concubine was frozen into a popsicle and was about to freeze to death. Su Lang just happened to come back from the academy and happened to meet this lowly concubine. He was careful and kind. When he saw that this lowly concubine was frozen by the winter snow, he hid this lowly concubine in his arms. After a night of warmth, this lowly concubine finally woke up. This lowly concubine didn't dare to stay in Su Lang's house for long and hurriedly flew underground to hibernate. When this lowly concubine recovered the next year, this lowly concubine went to find Su Lang to repay his kindness. However, when this lowly concubine found Su Lang, this lowly concubine found out that because this lowly concubine didn't know how to restrain the poison in her body when she was seriously injured, Su Lang was poisoned by this lowly concubine when he saved this lowly concubine. Although this lowly concubine was saved by the human race's physician, Su Lang was still blind. This lowly concubine felt that there was nothing this lowly concubine could do to repay him, so I pretended to be a wandering village woman and married into the Su family, pledging my life to you. When Su Lang grew old and no longer had anything to worry about at home, this lowly concubine brought Su Lang out to fulfill his long-cherished wish of traveling 10,000 li instead of reading 10,000 books. When I arrived at the Northern Sea, Su Lang was already old and couldn't walk anymore. Therefore, this lowly concubine built a house here and accompanied him on his last journey. "Wife, what are you talking about?" The man in the house was very puzzled when he heard the crooked demon language outside the house. However, he was also familiar with the woman's voice and couldn't help but ask in surprise, "Who is outside? We've been here for so long, but we've never had any neighbors come to visit. Could it be that it's our neighbors?" Shi Jinfeng sneered and changed the demon language in the air into human language. He mocked, "Wife, do you know what your wife is? She's just a snake spirit. Do you know where you live? This is a cliff that goes deep into the Northern Sea. In the past, there were many seabirds here, but now, not a single seabird can be seen. Do you know where these seabirds went? They were all swallowed by your snake spirit wife. Where did you get this neighborhood from?" Hearing Ao Jing's words, the house was silent at first. In the end, that man cried out in shock, Wife, who is this person? Is what he said true? Aren't you an orphan of the Bai family? How did you become a snake spirit? How is this possible?" "Husband." A trace of sorrow appeared in the woman's previously emotionless eyes. This sorrow was especially obvious in the pitch-black snake eyes. Feng Wu frowned and glared at Shi Jinfeng with some displeasure. Shi Jinfeng's heart shrank as fear appeared in his heart. At this moment he finally understood why his prince was so courteous to this demon with a phoenix body. It wasn't just because Feng Wu was powerful. "My wife. Say something. I don't believe what this person said." That man pressed, Are you a human or a demon?" The snake spirit woman hesitated for a moment and said, "Husband, Is it important whether this lowly concubine is a human or a demon? Unfortunately, that old man with the surname Su didn't answer. After a moment, the snake spirit woman said with some sorrow, "Husband, do you still remember the story of the little snake that this concubine often told you?" "Of course I remember." That man's voice trembled. "You often told this story to me. I thought you were comforting me. Could it be?" The man's voice was somewhat fearful. "Wife" was also replaced with "you." The woman straightened her waist with difficulty and turned her head to look sadly at the stone house. She had accompanied this man for dozens of years. Although she was a demon, she understood the man's thoughts from the change in his tone. "Damn it, this is ridiculous." Ao Jing couldn't help but ridicule. "You've shared a bed for dozens of years and you don't even know what your wife is. Have you spent your nights like this for dozens of years?" Hearing Ao Jing's words, Shi Jinfeng smiled and said, "This muddle-headed brother, perhaps you haven't been able to touch your wife's delicate skin at night before. Then why don't you touch it properly now?" Whether it was Ao Jing or Shi Jinfeng, after being played by Xiao Hua, they couldn't help but feel resentment. They couldn't find Xiao Hua, and when facing other weak people, they also had the heart to play with them. This kind of despicable person existed in both the human race and the demon race. Sure enough, the sound of light footsteps came from inside the stone house. "Husband." That snake spirit was greatly alarmed and cried out miserably, You can't." Chapter 3940. However, the footsteps were still so resolute, not shaken by the snake spirit's panic. Feng Wu's expression changed as he watched from nearby. This Feng Wu was naturally Xiao Hua's transformation. In fact, it wasn't much of a transformation. Xiao Hua only needed to slightly reveal the heavenly phoenix within his body, and that was enough to scare Ao Jing and the other dragons. Feng Wu could stop Ma Jinfeng from killing the snake spirit, but he couldn't stop the man from walking out of the stone house. Moreover, although Ao Jing and Ma Jinfeng were clearly trying to sow discord, the hand that would reveal the truth was on the man. The man had the right to know the truth, and Xiao Hua had no right to stop him. The man's figure appeared, and his hand slowly approached the snake spirit's body. The snake spirit's body trembled slightly and slowly moved, trying to dodge. However, the man didn't give up and followed the direction of the snake spirit's movement again. The snake spirit's body trembled violently for a moment before suddenly stopping. She looked at the man's resolute face with a hint of sadness in her eyes, and a look of desperation appeared in her eyes. The snake spirit no longer dodged. She raised her illusory hand slightly and held the man's hand. The man hurriedly touched the snake spirit's arm, and the panic on his face faded slightly. However, the snake spirit immediately pulled his hand, and bit by bit, it moved upwards, towards the place where the scales hadn't transformed. The man's arm trembled slightly, and he was somewhat hesitant, but also somewhat resolute. The distance of less than a foot actually took a full half a cup of tea's time. Not to mention the howling sea breeze, even the crowd of demons and shrimp soldiers and crab generals stopped moving, as if they were waiting for some kind of outcome. The man's hand finally touched the snake spirit's ice-cold scales, and the moment he touched the scales, the coldness struck the man like a bolt of lightning. The man's arm trembled, and his entire body twitched. His face revealed disbelief, and his empty eyes seemed to flash with spirit, as if he had seen many things. However, the man's mouth seemed to say, "You," and it was unknown what he wanted to say, and then, there was no more. Then, the man collapsed on the ground, white foam coming out of his mouth. In just a few breaths, the breath he breathed out was less than the breath he breathed in. The snake spirit looked coldly at the man's hand, which was now firmly gripping a piece of scale on the snake spirit's body. Even in the face of death, he did not loosen his grip. The man died. His grayish-white eyes stared fixedly at the sky, as if he had died with his eyes wide open. His hand was still stretched out, strangling the snake spirit's scales. The snake spirit raised her hand, and with a crack, she broke off the scale. The man's hand fell to the ground. The snake spirit reached out to cover the man's eyes and said in a low voice, "Su Lang, I thought that after accompanying you for your entire life, I had already become your true love in your heart. You wouldn't care about my demon body anymore. Actually, there are many times when I want to tell you the truth. I want to know if you care that I'm a snake spirit, but I'm afraid of seeing something I don't want to see. I thought that once we reached this place, I would be able to accompany you to the end of the journey and let you have a perfect ending. But the heavens want me to know what you're thinking. Stories are just stories. The more I tell them, the more you listen to them. What I ask and what you answer are not reality. When the illusion had become a thing of the past, when you really faced reality, you actually couldn't believe that you were actually scared to death by your first wife who had accompanied you for decades, and that you were actually scared to death by your first wife who had taken care of you all your life. The ending of this story is really laughable. Su Lang, how can you make me believe in the affection of this world? Demons will always be demons. What's the point of talking about feelings with humans? Ao Jing was also surprised by this unexpected ending, but seeing the snake spirit so sad, he couldn't help but sneer. Maybe it's time to end it. The snake spirit waved her hand and picked up the man's corpse. She looked at Ao Jing indifferently. Although she was still afraid, she still asked, "Can this concubine go now?" Go. Ao Jing waved his hand. Xiao Hua asked strangely, "Where are you taking this human's corpse?" After a human dies, it's important to be buried in peace. This concubine will bury him. The snake spirit looked at Xiao Hua and replied, "Let's go." Xiao Hua flapped his wings and sighed, "This old man should also go. After staying here for a few years, I didn't expect that you too would have such an ending. It's really beyond this old man's expectations." This old man often heard humans say that the world in people's hearts is often the most perfect. Many people don't dare to open their eyes and face reality because the world in front of them is too cruel. There are too many unsatisfactory things. This kid surnamed Su seems to be a pure and kind person from his speech and behavior. He even helped my demon race since he was young. Unfortunately, a pure and kind person is not necessarily a wise and brave person. His eyes are blind, and his heart is even more blind. After he finished speaking, Xiao Hua spread his wings and a whirlwind appeared. Xiao Hua's body turned into a phoenix that was dozens of feet long. As his wings danced, demonic clouds lingered around him. The clouds flickered and his demonic body instantly flew a few miles away, gradually disappearing into the sea breeze. Second Prince. Seeing Xiao Hua fly away, Ma Yingfeng whispered, "This Feng Wu is a demon expert." Alas, if not for today's matter, we could have become friends. Ao Jing smiled bitterly. After watching Xiao Hua fly away, the snake spirit also rolled up the demonic clouds and went inland. He whispered, "Since this matter has happened, let's wait for another chance." Ma Yingfeng nodded. He then looked at the several demon experts in the distance and whispered, "This subordinate suddenly thought of something. That human who escaped, was he the Confucian cultivator who took out the Immortal Palace's token? Should this subordinate and the others search Yuling Bay? Naturally, we have to search. This Confucian cultivator actually dared to ruin my North Sea Dragon Palace's matter. We can't let him go easily." Ao Jing nodded. However, it's hard to say whether this human is from the Immortal Palace or not. After all, the Immortal Palace's people have already revealed their identities. He can't directly attack my North Sea Dragon Palace. But then again, the human race is best at creating a diversion. He revealed his identity and thought that we wouldn't suspect him. Then he saved Jiang Sheng. He used Jiang Sheng to provoke the dragon palaces of the four seas so that the Immortal Palace could benefit. At this point, Ma Yingfeng continued in a low voice. Also, Baxia 47869, who fought with Jiang Sheng, was also rescued by a Confucian cultivator. This Confucian cultivator disguised as a Taoist cultivator must be related to Baxia 47869. Yes, that's possible. Ao Jing nodded. Check Baxia's records and see if you can find any clues. Actually, there are no more than a few possibilities. One is that the remnants of the heavenly abode river asked the Confucian cultivator to help. They borrowed Baxia's power to sneak into the arena and save Jiang Sheng. The first possibility was that the Confucian cultivator wanted to save Baxia and Jiang Sheng along the way. Another is that the Confucian cultivator knew these two and saved them at the same time. Yes, Your Highness's analysis is very reasonable. Ma Yingfeng smiled. No matter what, this Confucian cultivator disguised himself as a Taoist cultivator and came to my arena with bad intentions. No, if that Confucian cultivator wanted to save Jiang Sheng, he could have just entered the arena. Why did he drag Baxia into it? Also, if he wanted to make a move, he could have done it before Jiang Sheng's fight. Why wait until Jiang Sheng and Baxia make their move? Hao Jing suddenly realized something, shock appearing on his face. Could it be that the Confucian cultivator wanted to save Baxia, and Jiang Sheng was just doing it in passing? Damn it. Ao Jing anxiously said, Ma Jinfeng, you're right. Quickly go and investigate the background of this Baxia 4786-9. Since he's Baxia 4786-9, he's from the Baxia arena. Why would he come to my Yazi arena? Could it be? Ma Yingfeng smiled bitterly at Ao Jing's words. He naturally knew about Shen Kong's arrangements, but how could he dare to tell Ao Jing? Then, what about the Immortal Palace? Ma Yingfeng asked in a low voice. Investigate? Of course we have to investigate. Ao Jing sneered. I can't find the Confucian cultivator or the Taoist cultivator, but I can still find the human in Yuling Bay. Let's see if I can't turn Yuling Bay upside down. Unfortunately, no matter how powerful Ao Jing was, even if he turned Yuling Bay upside down, it would be impossible for him to find traces of Xiaohua. Because Xiaohua turned into a phoenix and flew away right in front of him. This was something that Ao Jing had never dreamed of. A heavenly phoenix with a monstrous aura, whose bloodline was even purer than his, the second prince of the North Sea Dragon Palace, was actually the human Confucian cultivator he was looking for. Xiaohua's heavenly phoenix demonic body spread its wings and soared along with the sea breeze. Looking at the vast sky and the boundless North Sea, a rare kind of comfort involuntarily emerged from the bottom of its heart. Xiaohua opened its mouth and let out a phoenix cry. This sound resounded through the sky. Not only did it shatter the clouds, it even stirred up the seawater in the vicinity of several dozen li layer upon layer of waves, with Xiaohua as the center, spread out in all directions. It looked like a medium-sized storm had already begun to form. Awesome! Xiaohua enjoyed the flight and couldn't help but think to himself. No wonder the ancients said, Great Peng rises with the wind one day, soaring up 90,000 li. This poem is refreshing to read, but when I really fly, the feeling is even more inconceivable. Freedom is just like this, to swim freely in the universe, to soar between heaven and earth, to be unrestrained, to do as one pleases. This kind of freedom should be the end of my cultivation. In the future, not to mention the carefree domain, even the void-shattering realm will be as relaxed and free as this. After flying for less than half an hour, in addition to the boundless sea of clouds, there was only the boundless blue sea. Xiaohua knew that he couldn't fly deeper into the North Sea. He released his soul consciousness and looked around. After confirming that there were no demons following him, and there was no demon expert's consciousness, he returned to his original appearance. Then he took out the Pegasus and flying carriage. Relying on his terrible sense of direction, he urged the flying carriage to fly to another place in the hidden immortal continent. Chapter 3941. Xiaohua urged the Pegasus to sit inside the flying carriage. He secretly pondered over his actions along the way and felt that there was nothing inappropriate. Only then did his mind enter the space to check and sort out the gains of this auction. After nearly an hour, Xiaohua felt that it was about time and released his soul consciousness. Sure enough, at the edge of his soul consciousness, he saw the appearance of land. Moreover, there was no bay or human figure on this land. It was not Yuling Bay at all. This naturally didn't exceed Xiaohua's expectations. He calmly put away the flying chariot and Pegasus, then used the water escape technique to reach the shore. He raised his hand and took the mountain river seal in his hand, then released Jiang Sheng from the space. Jiang Sheng had been standing in the space like a wooden chicken. Suddenly, he felt his body tighten and could move again. He hastily waved the sky piercer and guarded left and right. When he saw Xiaohua, he could not help but be stunned. The sky piercer pointed at Xiaohua and stood there in a daze. Jiang Sheng. Xiaohua did not dare to waste time and said in the demon language, "This Xiao rescued you from the Yazi arena. That North Sea Dragon Palace's second prince, Ao Jing, has been chasing after you. I'm afraid you have the North Sea Dragon Palace's warrior slave seal on your body. This Xiao wants to help you get rid of it first. Don't resist." But Jiang Sheng was not a fool. He did not ask why Xiaohua knew the demon language, nor did he ask why Xiaohua's cultivation was so high at this time. He only gave a simple reply. Xiaohua patted his forehead and used the illusion breaker eye. Those silver-white eyes looked around Jiang Sheng's body. Jiang Sheng felt a chill coming from his body. It was as if those expressionless eyes saw through his body from the inside out. "Don't move, don't resist." Just as Jiang Sheng could not help but tremble slightly, several layers of dark green brilliance gushed out from between Xiaohua's eyebrows again. The soul strands that were hard to see with the naked eye split into several strands and entered Jiang Sheng's body. When the soul strands touched Jiang Sheng's body, the body naturally resisted. Jiang Sheng hurriedly dispersed the defense of the body. Those soul strands instantly penetrated Jiang Sheng's blood vessels. In just a moment, Xiaohua frowns and says in surprise, "The North Sea Dragon Palace's slave warrior seal is really something. No wonder." No, this isn't the slave warrior seal. However, several strange waves flashed with a faint brilliance as they strangely wandered within Jiang Sheng's blood vessels. Although Xiaohua's delusion breaker eyes could see them, his soul strands could not capture these waves. It was not as simple as when Xiaohua saw Xian Kong use the dragon stratagem to extract the warrior slave seal from Yuanya's body. At this point, how could Xiaohua not know that the North Sea Dragon Palace's imprint in Jiang Sheng's body was far from something the warrior slave imprint could compare to? Wang. When Xiaohua frowned slightly, the soul strands have already retracted. Another layer of green light appeared between his eyebrows. It was Xiaohua's washing heaven and earth technique. As soon as the green light appeared, it immediately turned into a green seal text. This green seal text fell into Jiang Sheng's body, causing a burst of rather simple sound. This sound, in Jiang Sheng's ears, seemed to be born from his body. Jiang Sheng only felt his blood vessels rapidly surging, as if there were thousands of small hands in his blood vessels grabbing him at the same time. In just a moment, Jiang Sheng suddenly felt his body become light. Xiaohua's voice sounded in his ears again. "Jiang Sheng, this Xiao removing the North Sea Dragon Palace's imprint has attracted Ao Jing's attention. Don't move, this Xiao will take you and fly away." When Jiang Sheng heard this, he was a little unhappy, but before he could react, Xiaohua stretched out his hand and grabbed his neck. A wisp of fire flashed, and Xiaohua's figure disappeared with Jing Sheng. Poor Jiang Sheng was born with divine strength, but he had gone through several battles and almost died in the arena. How could he resist Xiaohua's tiger and wolf hands now? He was held in Xiaohua's hand like a little chick. In the time it took to eat a meal, clouds of fire appeared in the sky. A fire dragon roared and flew out of the fire clouds. The huge dragon head hung down from the sky with a ferocious look. Its eyes, which were comparable to flying swords, swept across the place where Xiaohua and Jiang Sheng had just stood. Then, the fire dragon roared and sniffed around a few times. Hurricanes swept across the ground, lifting pieces of gravel. This fire dragon was naturally Ao Jing. Xiaohua removing the imprint in Jiang Sheng's blood vessels immediately aroused Ao Jing's vigilance. Ao Jing didn't have time to inform Xian Kong and the other dragon generals. He first transformed into a dragon and chased over. However, he was still too late. Except for a trace of the North Sea Dragon Palace's imprint, there was nothing left here. How is this possible? Who dares to remove the demon imprisoning knot of my North Sea Dragon Palace on the side of the North Sea? Ao Jing was furious. He opened his mouth and spat out a raging fire, burning an area of several miles. This Confucian cultivator, Other than someone from the Immortal Palace, how could he have such a powerful method? A Taoist cultivator? A Confucian cultivator? It's just a smokescreen from the Immortal Palace. They want to trick me. Damn it, I'll definitely report this to my father. How dare they destroy the North Sea Dragon Palaces, plan to lure the enemy. Ao Jing cursed angrily for a moment. He was already furious and had lost all sense of reason. The decision he had made calmly earlier was now nothing but bullshit in his eyes. He flew up and was about to return when Xian Kong hurriedly chased after him with some shrimp soldiers and crab generals. Ao Jing snorted coldly. He ignored Xian Kong and swayed his dragon tail as he flew towards Yuling Bay. On the other hand, Xian Kong stopped in midair. He glanced at the flames on the ground that hadn't been extinguished and the ground that had been charred yellow, and then he sighed and waved his hand. Everyone returned to the Feather Spirit Bay. However, before he could fly 100 feet, he hurriedly stopped and looked into the distance respectfully. After a moment, a ferocious smile appeared on his face. He ordered, "Pass down the second prince's order. Track down the people from the Immortal Palace with all our strength. If you find any trace of them, report it immediately." The shrimp soldiers and crab generals all scattered and went in different directions. Xian Kong set up a demon cloud and followed Ao Jing back to Yuling Bay. Ao Jing thought that the Confucian cultivator in his eyes had already left Yuling Bay with Jiang Sheng. However, he didn't know that he had already been lured away by Xiaohua. Xiaohua only flew for a moment before he asked Jiang Sheng for the direction of Yuling Bay. He turned and flew towards Yuling Bay. Just as Ao Jing was getting angry, Xiaohua had already flown to the left side of Yuling Bay. Xiaohua's figure landed between some mountain peaks. He put down Jiang Sheng and narrowed his eyes as he looked in the direction of Yuling Bay. Previously, Xiaohua had left in a hurry and didn't have time to put the green-robed Xiaohua into the space. At this moment, the green-robed Xiaohua had already sensed Xiaohua's arrival. He had urged the formless Yuanying to return. Xiaohua turned to Jiang Sheng and said, "Jiang Sheng, you must have recognized me. I'm the Taoist cultivator who fought against you when you flooded Longevity Town that year. In order to find Dragon Lady Jiang Hong in Longevity Town, you didn't hesitate to use the water of Liao River and treat the people of the human race as weeds. I shouldn't have saved you, but because you were eager to save your master and because I have some fate with Jiang Hong, the people of Longevity Town didn't lose too many lives because of you. I saved you from the hands of the North Sea Dragon Palace. Your Heavenly Abode River scheme is too big, so I don't dare to get involved easily. You know what happened today, and you don't need to worry about my kindness. You can go by yourself. Let's not meet again." As he spoke, the green-robed Xiaohua had already flown over. Xiaohua withdrew his Yuanying and the green-robed Xiaohua entered his body. Xiaohua instantly had a clear understanding of the situation after he left. Thus, he said to Jiang Sheng, "Oh right, I heard that the North Sea Dragon Palace has already sent out shrimp soldiers and crab generals to search for you and me. I won't be returning to Yuling Bay anymore. You don't have to go either." After he finished speaking, Xiaohua urged his magic power and was about to flee into the distance. However, before his figure could disappear, Jiang Sheng's words made him stand there in a daze. "Jiang Hong fell into the hands of the North Sea Dragon Palace with me," Jiang Sheng said, his words like gold. "What?" Xiaohua turned his head and asked in disbelief. "Jiang Hong is your family's dragon princess. How did she fall into the hands of the North Sea Dragon Palace with you? How did you protect your princess?" Jiang Sheng wasn't surprised by Xiaohua's reproach. He even blushed a little as he explained in a low voice, "I escorted my family's princess to Yuling Bay to meet with Jiang Che and the others." Unfortunately, before he could finish, Xiaohua waved his hand coldly. "Forget it. The matter of your Heavenly Abode River has nothing to do with me." "Who captured Jiang Hong?" "I won't." Just like how he interrupted Jiang Sheng's words, Xiaohua was unable to continue speaking at this point. Lu Yi saw Jiang Hong as his own sister. He would rather suffer than let Jiang Hong get hurt. Lu Yi was his favorite disciple. If Jiang Hong was captured by the North Sea Dragon Palace, her ending was needless to say. If she wasn't a princess, she would have been sent to the arena to die like Jiang Sheng. If he didn't rescue Jiang Hong, how would he face Lu Yi in the future? Seeing that Xiaohua didn't speak, Jiang Sheng said, Jiang Che and the others are in Yuling Bay. If you don't want to do it directly, please send me to Flowing Lightning Residence. Xiaohua looked at Jiang Sheng from head to toe. At this moment, Jiang Sheng's physical injuries were still very serious. It was impossible for Jiang Sheng to safely find Jiang Che by himself. Even if he didn't want to save Jiang Hong, he should send Jiang Sheng to Flowing Lightning Residence. Moreover, how could he not try to save Jiang Hong? Forget it. Xiaohua smiled bitterly. For my disciples' happiness, I can only be a good person again. Xiaohua said this in human language. He didn't want Jiang Sheng to hear it, so Jiang Sheng didn't understand. But looking at Xiaohua's expression, Jiang Sheng knew Xiaohua's choice. Then, Xiaohua took out the mountain and river seal and said, Ao Jing should be back soon. Come in. When I find Flowing Lightning Residence, I'll let you out. Thank you, fellow immortal Xiao. Jiang Sheng said with a smile. He wasn't surprised by Xiaohua's help. Chapter 3942. Xiaohua shook the mountain river seal and retrieved Jiang Sheng. He then activated his flying technique and flew towards Feather Spirit Bay. Not long after, Xiaohua arrived at the place where he met the snake spirit. Looking at the familiar place, Xiaohua sighed. In just one night, so many things had happened, which made Xiaohua realize a lot. At this time, Yuling Bay was different from before. Whether it was humans or demons, there were much fewer people. The shops and tents were equally desolate. Xiaohua identified the direction and landed on the ground. Seeing a Confucian cultivator hurriedly flying by, he hurriedly stepped forward and cupped his hands. Greetings, fellow immortal. That Confucian cultivator looked at Xiaohua and said coldly, What do you want? Sorry to disturb you, fellow immortal. May I know where Flowing Thunder Residence is? Xiaohua didn't get angry and asked with a smile. Flowing Thunder Residence? I don't know. Hearing this, that Confucian cultivator waved his hand and flew away without thinking. Damn it, we're all humans. Even if we're different, there's no need to be like this. Xiaohua sneered, and then he looked left and right. After that, he flew over a few hundred meters and blocked the path of a leopard spirit that was similarly riding a demonic cloud. Fellow immortal, I wonder if fellow immortal knows of the Lightning Flow Residence? Flowing Thunder Residence. That leopard spirit's yellow eyes turned a few times as if he was thinking, then he shook his head and said, I don't know. You'd better ask other demons. Seeing the leopard spirit hurriedly leave, Xiaohua pinched his chin and became anxious. It can't be, right? I don't know one, I don't know two, this Jiang Sheng can't be lying to me, right? Looking around, Xiaohua walked into a small tent. The inside of the tent was similar to a shop, but it was very small and there weren't many things. Seeing Xiaohua enter, a shrimp-like member of the sea race hurriedly greeted him and said with a smile, Fellow immortal, what do you want to choose? Xiaohua looked at those ordinary pearls and said with a smile, I don't want to buy anything, I just want to ask for directions. Hee, fellow immortal, please tell me. The shrimp-like member's attitude was very good. Does fellow immortal know Flowing Thunder Residence? Xiaohua said. Seeing the sea shrimp's hesitant appearance, Xiaohua started to feel apprehensive. Sure enough, the sea shrimp shook his head and said, Sorry, immortal friend. I've only been in Yuling Bay for half a year. I've never heard of the place you mentioned. If you want to find out, it's best to find the demons who have lived here for a long time. They should know. As soon as Sea Shrimp opened his mouth, Xiaohua immediately thought of the general of the sea race near the Bai and Yazi auction hall. Perhaps only the monster race would know such a strange place. Thank you, fellow immortal. Xiaohua smiled and cupped his hands before walking out of the tent. For you, do you have proof of Yuling Bay? Just as Xiaohua walked out of the tent, a rather shaky voice sounded in front of him. Xiaohua raised his head to look. It was a group of shrimp soldiers and crab generals holding shining weapons in their hands. They just happened to pass by this tent. Seeing a Dao sect cultivator walk out from inside, they immediately surrounded Xiaohua. Xiao Huan naturally wouldn't put these small shrimps in his eyes. He took out the jade pendant that you gave him and said, "This is the proof that this old man got from the Sea Whale King. You can take a look for yourself." Sea Whale King? The leading crab general's eyes bulged out of their sockets. He looked at the jade pendant in Xiao Hua's hand and said coldly, "As long as it's not a token issued by my Yuling Hall, it's invalid. No matter who you are, you have to come with us to the Yuling Hall." "How dare you?" Xiao Hua snorted and angrily rebuked. These shrimp soldiers and crab generals were so scared that they trembled. However, they had already received the order from the Yuling Hall. No matter how scared they were, they didn't dare to not brace themselves and surround Xiao Hua. At this moment, a bright cloud of fire flashed in the sky. Ao Jing roared all the way back to Yuling Bay. Along the way, he threw fireballs randomly. Who knows how many flowers and plants were damaged? "Brothers!" Xian Kong's voice sounded behind Ao Jing at the same time. "Each team will be divided into two groups. One half will continue to search for suspicious Confucian cultivators. The other half will form a team outside Yuling Bay and spread out to search the inland." Yes. The shrimp soldiers and crab generals surrounding Xiao Hua didn't dare to disobey the order. Half of them flew out of Yuling Bay on a demon cloud. The remaining half looked at Xiao Hua's clothes, scratched their heads and thought for a moment. They asked, "Are you a Confucian cultivator?" "This old man is a Taoist cultivator." Xiao Hua raised his sleeve and said with a smile, This half of the shrimp soldiers and crab generals shook their heads and let Xiao Hua go. Then they continued to search in front. "Damn it, with this kind of soldiers, they want to catch this Xiao Hua? What a fool's dream." Xiao Hua laughed inwardly and flew towards the Yazi auction house. On the contrary, when he arrived near the auction house, apart from a small number of demons on guard, there were fewer shrimp soldiers and crab generals patrolling. The humans and demons who were watching the excitement also disappeared. Even the shops around the auction house were mostly closed. The previous lively scene was nowhere to be seen. However, the shop where the sea race generals sold sea relics was still half open. It seemed like it was waiting for Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua's figure had just stepped into the shop when a respectful voice sounded, "Senior is here." "Why are you still here?" Xiao Hua was slightly taken aback. "Who are you?" Without waiting for Xiao Hua to answer, a yuan thought swept over from afar. It landed on Xiao Hua. Soon after, a cold voice sounded. Xiao Hua naturally noticed that there were people from the auction house inspecting nearby. He was not afraid of being discovered. When he heard the question, he turned his head and said with a smile, "This one is Xiao Hua. My Taoist name is Taoist Xiao. What's the matter?" "General, what's the matter?" The person who came was a sea race general wearing armor. He looked like a big octopus. On the side of the armor, several tentacles held several different weapons. He looked very mighty. "Taoist Xiao?" When the sea general heard this, his expression changed slightly. After all, a Taoist cultivator who could be called a Taoist master should be at the early Yuanying stage. He was not someone he could resist. However, the sea general looked left and right. He swam toward Xiao Hua and asked, "What are you doing here? Do you have a certificate issued by my Feather Spirit Palace?" "This Taoist Xiao is this little one's friend." Yuan hurriedly ran out of the shop and respectfully said to the sea general, "He came to the Feather Spirit Bay to play. This little one has already helped him obtain a certificate from the Sea Whale King." Hee. When the sea general saw Yuan come out, he unconsciously sneered and said, "The Feather Spirit Palace has already issued an order. Apart from the certificate issued by the Feather Spirit Palace, all other certificates are invalid. All human cultivators with invalid certificates are to be detained in the Feather Spirit Palace. Their whereabouts and any suspicious signs will be investigated. Since you are related to this human, you should also come with this general." Yuan was clearly stunned. He took half a step back in fear. However, it was only half a step. He stepped forward and said, "Senior Xiao was invited by this little one. This little one will guarantee his identity with my life. This little one will follow the general to the Feather Spirit Palace." "You." The sea general was startled. He was clearly caught off guard. However, he immediately waved his tentacles and said, "What is a small shrimp like you doing in the Feather Spirit Palace? Be a good boy and stay aside." Then the sea general looked at Xiaohua and said, "Taoist Xiao, do you want to go by yourself? Or do you want this one to invite you?" Impudent. At this moment, a rather dignified voice came from behind Yuan. The owner of the shop, the sea race general, walked out and scolded, "This is this general's honored guest, Brew. Why aren't you scramming back?" The sea general called Brew was shocked when he heard the scolding. He almost naturally bowed and said, "This subordinate greets General Lu." Just as he said this, the sea general suddenly woke up. He straightened up and coldly looked at the sea general called Lu and said, "Lu, don't forget. You are no longer a general of the North Sea Dragon Palace. What qualifications do you have to order this general around? This general is here on the orders of the Feather Spirit Palace to investigate suspicious humans. Since you are colluding with this human, you might as well come with this general to the Feather Spirit Palace." Xiao Hua coldly watched from the side, his heart somewhat rueful. There was a struggle for power and fame between the human race, and it was easy for people to scheme against each other. Xiao Hua clearly smelled this kind of dark smell between the Hai Jianglu and the bromine. Lu's face was extremely unsightly. He opened his mouth to say something, but it was very clear that Brew was no longer a small soldier under his command. He could not order him around. But if he let Brew take Xiaohua away, Lu could not bear to. After all, he already saw hope in Xiaohua for a group of old soldiers to get rid of their injuries. It was not that Lu did not think of inviting Xiaohua to the Feather Spirit Palace and then he would tell him about Xiaohua's abilities. But the problem was, he didn't know if Xiaohua was willing to cooperate with the North Sea Dragon Palace. If Xiaohua wasn't willing, and he had leaked Xiaohua's divine ability, it would bring disaster to Xiaohua. Lu didn't think he would do such a thing. Second, even if Xiaohua was willing to cooperate with the North Sea Dragon Palace, how could the North Sea Dragon Palace waste a divine doctor like Xiaohua on these old soldiers? There was no lack of shrimp soldiers and crab generals in the North Sea Dragon Palace that could not be cured. Xiaohua would not have the free time to treat the old soldiers that he cared about. "What if I can vouch for you?" A faint voice sounded. The sea snake D also walked out and coldly looked at Brew. When Brew heard D's voice, he hurriedly retreated. It was as if he had suffered a great loss in D's hands. His several tentacles quickly danced. He was even more shocked. You, what's wrong with me? Can't you recognize me?" D said with a smile. "The dignified Shanghai general is really awe-inspiring. How come I have never seen a soft octopus with a hard bone? Oh my, I forgot. How can an octopus have bones? I really overestimated you." D. Brew's tall figure was like paper in front of D. He slightly swayed. He somewhat inarticulately called out, "Why are you here? If you vouch for me..." Chapter 3943. At this point, Bromine hesitated. His two slightly transparent eyes trembled rapidly. He looked at Xiaohua, then looked to the left. He was afraid that this was a trap set for him by D. However, Bromine had been here for a long time, and other soldiers had started to pay attention to this place. This gave Bromine the so-called encouragement. "Fine." Bromine clenched his teeth and said, "You're the same as Lu. You're no longer a subordinate of the North Sea Dragon Palace. What qualifications do you have to guarantee? Since you're with this human, you can't get away with it. You don't know what happened in the Yazzie arena last night. Let's go." Bromine took a few steps forward, and the weapon on his tentacles danced arrogantly. "Is that so? Are you sure you want me to go?" Drip took a step forward with a faint smile. This simple step scared Bromine into retreating a few steps, as if he didn't dare to get too close to Drip. "You're pissing me off." Just as Drip was about to push Bromine back, a low, powerless voice came from behind Drip. Then, Chio's grandfather, Old Shrimp, staggered out with a shabby crutch. Without saying a word, he swung the crutch at Bromine. Bromine's body was naturally much bigger than Chio's grandfather. The crutch also looked funny. Bromine only needed to lift any one of his tentacles to knock it away. However, seeing Old Shrimp's crutch coming at him, Bromine didn't dare to move. He just let Old Shrimp's crutch hit him. Bromine could only wave his tentacles and the weapon in the air. He shouted in exasperation, "Old man, you're a veteran who's been through fire and water. You've bled a lot for the North Sea Dragon Palace. You've done a lot in battle, but you can't delay me. I'll guarantee for Daoist Xiao." Old Shrimp said loudly, "If you want to take Daoist Xiao, then take me too." "You can't do it either." Bromine didn't dare to fight back, but when he saw some of his colleagues coming over, he gritted his teeth and answered, "Of course Old Shrimp can't do it. What about us? We'll all guarantee for Daoist Xiao." As he said that, another group of old Sea Tribe members came out of Lu's shop. Some were Sea Tribe members, some were Sea Tribe members, some were loaches, and some were crabs. Bromine was at a loss for words. He glanced at the soldiers of the North Sea Dragon Palace who had surrounded them, then quickly fled. Although these veterans didn't have any official positions and were on the verge of death, they had made outstanding military contributions. They were all old ruffians who couldn't rub sand in their eyes. They were far from what the current soldiers could afford to offend. Usually, these old ruffians would reprimand these soldiers whenever they saw them, let alone now that Bromine had provoked them. The group of Dragon Palace soldiers saw that the situation was not right and ran away, leaving only Bromine to stay behind. Bromine was dumbfounded at the sight of so many veterans. His head was bigger than a mountain. He didn't think that his duty of inviting this strange human to the Feather Spirit Palace would cause so much trouble. "Hee, fellow immortals." Xiao Hua smiled and cupped his hands. "There's no need to make things too difficult for this general." Although this Xiao participated in the Yazi Auction Hall's auction, this Xiao withdrew from the auction midway for some reason. Although this Xiao doesn't know what happened in the auction, if this Xiao needs to go and ask, this Xiao has no objections. "Look at Daoist Xiao." An old loach clapped his hands. "He's really a Daoist master. He can kill you with a raise of his hand, but he's still talking to you calmly. Little octopus, do you think this kind of Daoist master is the human Confucian cultivator you're looking for?" An old crab waved his claws and shouted, "If Daoist Xiao wants to go to the Feather Spirit Palace, we'll go together. Wherever Daoist Xiao goes, we'll go together." Hearing this, Xiao Hua didn't need to look anymore. This must be an old ruffian. He hadn't even met Xiao Hua and he was already relying on Xiao Hua. Bromine began to step back and said with a somewhat panicked tone, "The Feather Spirit Palace is looking for a human Confucian cultivator. This Daoist Xiao is obviously not one. Just now my eyes were playing tricks on me." Bromine was a junior in front of these veterans. He couldn't afford to offend any of them. Before the veterans surrounded him, he hurriedly withdrew. At this time, Bromine wasn't afraid of anything going wrong. Although these veterans looked old and weak, they had all risked their lives for the North Sea Dragon Palace for so many years. Their words might not be as useful as his in the Feather Spirit Palace, but in the Feather Spirit Bay, 100 of him couldn't compare to one of them. Seeing Bromine leave with his tail between his legs, several veterans still scolded themselves. "Damn it, where did this little bastard come from? How dare he behave so atrociously in front of me?" Xiao Hua smiled and didn't say anything. He just stood aside. "Daoist Xiao." Lu stood aside and said with a smile, "I'm sorry to make you laugh." Bromine was a little narrow-minded, but he was timid and didn't have too many bad intentions. I guess he saw that Daoist Xiao was a human and wanted to take credit for it. In fact, if Daoist Xiao wasn't the Confucian cultivator they were looking for, they wouldn't make things too difficult for Daoist Xiao. "Hee, it doesn't matter." Xiao Hua waved his hand and said, "If it wasn't for the fact that I was still worried about your injuries, I'm afraid I would have left long ago and ignored his little tricks. Many thanks for Daoist Xiao's pity." Seeing Xiao Hua return, Lu was already happy in his heart. However, he was still uneasy. He didn't know whether Xiao Hua came back for the sea Saraira or to save the old sea shrimp. Now that he heard it, his heart had already flown away. His eyes blurred and he hurriedly bowed to express his thanks. Sea Snake Li moved his body and said in a low voice, "Let's invite Taoist Xiao in first. Now that there are changes in the auction, the entire Feather Spirit Bay is heavily guarded. It's better not to attract the attention of the Feather Spirit Palace." Yes. Lu woke up and hurriedly said, "Taoist Xiao, please come in. Please. A group of veterans were now very obedient. They all had smiles on their faces and opened the door of the shop. Although the other party was from the sea race and might have human blood on their hands, Xiaohua saw that they were all like the old sea shrimp. Many parts of their bodies were wrapped in seaweed, and some strange smell floated out from the seaweed. Xiaohua still raised his hand and said, "Seniors." Speaking until here, Xiaohua stopped again. The sea race was a monster, there was no way to call them seniors. However, before Xiaohua's face became awkward, the group of veterans hurriedly bowed and said, "Taoist Xiao, please." Seeing this, Xiaohua no longer modestly declined and stepped into the shop. Then, these veterans hurriedly came in under the lead of the old sea shrimp. "Taoist Xiao, please sit." After Lu walked into the shop, he hurriedly took out a chair from who knows where and respectfully placed it beside Xiaohua. Xiaohua looked at the group of veterans. Those veterans hurriedly raised their hands and said with a smile, "Taoist Xiao, please." "All right." Xiaohua sat down, looked at Li and said with a smile, "Is this Xiao's pill easy to use?" Li swam over and prostrated herself in front of Xiaohua. She said in a low voice, "This one thanks Taoist Xiao for the pill. This one's illness has been completely cured. Even, this one feels that my strength can still increase in the future." Xiaohua was slightly surprised, but he immediately understood. The soul-nourishing pill refined by the green-robed Xiaohua was refined in the space. There were 3 moon stars and 6 sun stars in the space, so the power of the stars and moon naturally surpassed that of the hidden immortal continent. Moreover, the soul-nourishing pill nourished Di's soul, allowing Di to better control her own bloodline through her soul. Moreover, the secrets of the sea snake's bloodline could also be known by Di, so Di could use these to enhance her strength. After understanding, Xiaohua said with a smile, "Then I congratulate Taoist Xiao. I didn't expect that the pill that this one casually refined would have such an effect." Casually? Casually refined? Li was somewhat dumbfounded. In her eyes, that pill was really miraculous and wonderful. At the same time, Lu said in surprise, "That pill was really refined by Taoist Xiao?" And, naturally. Although it was refined by the green-robed Xiaohua, was there any difference between this and Xiaohua's refinement? Xiaohua naturally admitted with a smile. But. Lu opened his mouth as if he wanted to ask, but he was somewhat hesitant. Xiaohua said straightforwardly, "Since this one has returned, I also want to see if I can do anything for you. After all, if your illness can be cured, then you can hunt less sea relics. This is also a matter of boundless virtue. It's just that this one doesn't know much about your sea race's healing techniques. Similarly, I also don't have the pill formula for refining pills or medicines." "This is easy," an old ruffian shouted without hesitation. "We will kill our way to the apricot forest medicine shop and make them hand over whatever pill formula." Xiaohua smiled but didn't say anything. The sea snake Li hurriedly said, "If you want to go, then go. In this way, even if Taoist Xiao wants to help, he won't dare." Yes, I was just joking. Taoist Xiao shouldn't take it seriously." That old ruffian laughed mischievously. He naturally understood that Xiaohua wouldn't let him loot the human race's medicine shop and harm the human race's interests. "Taoist Xiao," Lu said from the side. This one also thought for a long time just now. It's not realistic to get the pill formula from the apricot forest medicine shop. Moreover, his pill formula might not be useful. Taoist Zhao's pill formula still needs to be obtained from the North Sea Dragon Palace, Zhai Xinglu, Yazi Auction House, Li Lai Trading Company, and Luo Yi Merchant Union. Of course the Dragon Palace has it, but the Feather Spirit Palace may not give it. Zhai Xinglu, Yazi Auction House, and Li Lai Trading Company need to bid. To be honest, Not to mention whether these things are available, we don't have many sea crystals and may not be able to bid. The last place left is the Luo E Merchant Union. This one has heard of the Luo E Merchant Union's reputation before. It's a merchant union formed by the demon race of the Thousand Demons Sacred Realm. It's not large in scale and its transactions are always fair. Moreover, they are indeed resourceful and can get things that ordinary demon race can't. This one wants to see Taoist Xiao and ask him clearly. This one will go find the Luo E Merchant Union now. Chapter 3944. Oh. Xiao Hua smiles and turns to look at Yuan, asking, "Is this your recommendation again?" Yuan hurriedly waves his hand and says, "This is not what I said. General knew about it and then asked about it. That's why I reported it to you." Xiao Hua thinks for a while and says to Lu, "It would be best if you could find Bei Wen who recorded the pill recipe in Luo E Merchant Union. I would be able to refine pills according to the recipe." "Taoist Xiao, you don't want to go with me?" Lu is a bit surprised and disappointed. Xiao Hua smiles, "I don't know much about the pill recipes of the monster race. It doesn't matter if I go or not. You only need to ask the monster race in Luo E Merchant Union for the pill recipe. They should be in charge of it. Moreover, I have something important to do. I'm afraid I can't accompany you." Alright. Lu naturally wants Xiao Hua to go with him. However, Xiao Hua has something important to do so he can't force him. Beside him, Drop hastily asks tactfully, "Taoist Xiao, what is it? Do you want to do it in Yuling Bay?" Xiao Hua nods. After thinking for a while, he asks, "Do you know a place called Drifting Pavilion?" "Drifting Pavilion?" Drop thinks for a while and shakes his head. "I am familiar with every place in Yuling Bay, but I have never heard of Drifting Pavilion. Could it be that this drifting lightning abode that Taoist Xiao mentioned is located outside of Yuling Bay?" Xiao Hua shakes his head and replies, "No, it's in Yuling Bay." Drop looks at some old soldiers on the left. After thinking for a while, he says in a low voice, "Taoist Xiao, if possible, you should ask these old sea race." Xiao Hua nodded, then raised his head to look at the closed shop door and said, "Everyone, this Xiao came to Yuling Bay to look for an old friend. He left a message for this Xiao, saying that he was at the Drifting Pavilion, but this Xiao couldn't find him anywhere in Yuling Bay. I wonder if anyone can answer my question?" Drifting Pavilion? The group of old Oceanids are also slightly startled. They all look at each other, wanting to share Xiao Hua's burden. However, they seem to have never heard of this name before. One of the old Oceanids even asks, "Taoist Xiao, do you think this flowing lightning residence, is it the E residence? Or a place name? Or a brothel that you humans often talk about?" Xiao Hua smiled and said, "This Xiao doesn't know either, I only know the name of this place." "I-oh." Suddenly, old sea shrimp seemed to have thought of something and said hurriedly, "I remember now. It seems that there is such a place." "Oh? You know about it?" Hearing this, Xiao Hua was overjoyed. Seeing that old sea shrimp didn't say anything, he asked, "Could it be that there's something strange about this place?" "Indeed." Seeing Xiao Hua being so cautious, old sea shrimp winked at the group of old sea race members and whispered a few words to Xiao Hua. Sure enough, Xiao Hua's brows slightly creased. After a while, Xiao Hua smiled and said, "Since this Xiao has come, then I should still make a trip. Everyone just stay here, or go somewhere together. General, hurry to the Loi Merchant Union. When this Xiao pays a visit to my old friend, I can refine some pills or medicines for you." Lu nodded vigorously and said, "I'll go now. When I find the pill formula, we'll meet at Yaoshi. This place is too close to the Yazi auction house. After all, it's inconvenient for Taoist Xiao to be here." "Indeed. You all go first. I'll immediately go find a Feather Spirit Palace certificate for Taoist Xiao," an old sea race member said hurriedly. Xiao Hua watched as Lu opened the shop door and the group of old sea race members walked out. He said to the fish monster, "Yun, take this Xiao to that place." "Okay, this little one understands." The fish monster was extremely excited. It rubbed its illusory hands and nodded vigorously. Sea Snakely hurriedly said, Taoist Xiao, do you want me to accompany you? No need. Xiao Hua waved his hand. You go with Lu to the Loi Merchant Union. Since there is a pill formula, there must be some demonic herbs, demonic fruits and so on. You also help to take a look. Lu is not a shrewd businessman. He, Li covered his mouth and said, he's not a human to begin with. Xiao Hua nodded. He looked around and said, if possible, give all the sea relics in this shop to this Xiao. This Xiao has a use for them. No problem. Li said without hesitation, this one will pack it up right away. When Taoist Xiao returns, I'll give them all to you. Xiao Hua took out a Qianquan bag and handed it to Li. He directly took the fish monster and prepared to leave the shop. The little sea shrimp waiting at the entrance of the shop hurriedly said shyly, Taoist Xiao, Grandpa and the others have gone to find a certificate for Taoist Xiao. Please wait for a moment. They really went. Xiao Hua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Thus, Xiao Hua simply stood inside the shop and watched Li tidy up the sea relics in the shop. On the other hand, the somewhat tyrannical shop assistant from before had long disappeared. After a while, Li tidied up all the sea relics in the shop and gave the Qianquan bag to Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua looked inside and saw that there were indeed a lot of sea relics. Thinking about how each sea relic was the life of a sea race member, Xiao Hua increasingly felt that doing these things was worth it. Xiao Hua had just received the Qianquan bag when the old sea shrimp brought the two old sea race members back hurriedly. From the looks of it, they didn't seem to be injured at all. Xiao Hua received a fish card and carefully held it. He smiled and said, many thanks, everyone. You can go and rest first. When this Xiao comes back, I will help you refine pills. Seeing Xiao Hua treasuring the fish card very much, the old sea shrimp and the others were quite happy. They cupped their hands and said, thank you for everything, Taoist Xiao. Seeing the old sea shrimp and the others leave, Xiao Hua also waved his hand and hurriedly took the fish monster out of the shop. After a while, the fish monster asked in a low voice, Taoist Xiao, where are you going? Xiao Hua said these two words through sound transmission. You want to go to Qi? The fish monster was shocked and almost blurted out. Fortunately, he only spoke half of it and stopped. Xiao Hua smiled and said, if you don't dare to go, then just point in the direction. This Xiao already knows where it is, I can ask. No, this little one will take Taoist Xiao there. Yuan clenched his teeth and said. Then he raised his hand and a demonic cloud appeared under his feet, asking Xiao Hua to fly with him. Xiao Hua urged his flying technique and followed behind Yuan, flying towards the outside of Yuling Bay. Sure enough, along the way, there were many shrimp soldiers and crab generals patrolling, stopping Xiao Hua from time to time. The certificate given to Xiao Hua by the old sea shrimp was quite useful. Every sea race took a look at it and didn't ask much, directly letting them go. After flying over the mountain range of Yuling Bay, they arrived at the other side. Before they could get close, a hot aura hit them in the face, and a strong smell of sulfur gradually diffused in the air. Near this hot aura, there were no sea race, and the patrolling shrimp soldiers and crab generals were also gone. After flying for a while, Yuan's figure was already trembling. Obviously, he couldn't adapt to the heat here. Xiao Hua said, Yuan, Qi must be in front. You don't need to get too close. This old man will go by himself. You find a suitable place to stay. After this old man comes out, I will come to find you. The fish monster stopped in midair and said very shamefully, many thanks for Taoist Zhao's sympathy. This little one really can't stand it anymore. And this is a hot place. It's different from the humid life of UC race. It's normal that you can't stand it. Xiao Hua smiled and waved his hand, then flew forward. The fish monster watched Xiao Hua's figure fly over the foothills and fall into the valley. It quickly turned around and flew straight to the inside of Yuling Bay. The salty sea breeze swept up the moisture and fell on the fish monster's body. Only then did the fish monster let out a long sigh of relief. It didn't even transform into its human form and returned to its fish form. It twisted in the air, as if it was enjoying it to the extreme. Xiao Hua flew over the mountain valley, and in front of him was a sea of scarlet red. Scarlet red mountain rocks, scarlet red sand, and also surging scarlet red lava. However, this scarlet red only covered a range of a few dozen li. Looking further into the valley, there was another stretch of dilapidated fences and dilapidated walls. Some dilapidated stone pillars, collapsed pavilions, and other things piled up in the valley. Many weeds and wild vines wrapped around these buildings. Xiaohua had already learned from old sea shrimp that this valley was called Drifting Pavilion thousands of years ago. It was a place where some monster race gathered. However, there was a change later on. A huge amount of magma was produced overnight, completely destroying the entire Drifting Pavilion. After the monster race left, another monster race occupied this place and changed the name of this place to Chi-Chi. As for why Yuan's expression changed when he heard about this place, it was not only because this place was hot and basically no sea race came here, but also because the monster race that occupied this place was a barbarian, a monster beast that liked to eat sea race. Yuan usually didn't have enough time to hide. Why would he come here? Xiaohua stood in midair and released his divine sense to explore. He had already seen the dried fish hanging on the mountain rock in the depths of the valley. These dried fish were not the kind that ordinary people would hang in their homes. The short ones were a few feet long and the long ones were several zhang long. They were all dried up and shrunk to one place. It was obvious that when these barbarians hunted these sea race people, the sea race people's bodies were huge. Xiaohua secretly smiled and said, "This place is not bad." Presumably, the North Sea Dragon Palace also didn't expect Jiang Che to be hiding here. Then Xiaohua let Jiang Xing out. The moment Jiang Xing came out, he immediately shrunk his neck and looked a little uncomfortable. He then looked around and asked curiously, "This is Drifting Pavilion? I'll let fellow immortal Jiang know." Xiaohua smiled and said, "This place was originally called Drifting Pavilion. Later on, because magma spewed out, Drifting Pavilion was destroyed. Now it's called Chi-Chi this?" Jiang Xing was a little hesitant. He frowned and said, "Since it's called Chi-Chi, why did Jiang Che say it's Drifting Pavilion? How can I find Jiang Che? Anyway, this is Drifting Pavilion." Xiaohua shrugged and replied, "As for how to find Jiang Che, I don't know. However, there's a group of barbarians here who know how to forge weapons. You might as well go and ask them." "Alright." Jiang Sheng thought for a while and nodded. However, after flying for several zhang, he turned his head and asked, "Taoist Xiao, the North Sea Dragon Palace didn't chase after us, right?" Xiaohua looked between the mountain rocks and casually replied, "That's good." Jiang Xing smiled and flew down the valley. Chapter 39:45. At the bottom of the valley was an enormous mountain crevice. Within the mountain crevice was a space of hundreds of meters. Within this space, one after another, stone caves surrounded the crimson magma in the center. In front of the stone caves, there were many materials and large pieces of stone scattered about. At the edge of the magma, there were also some weapons submerged in the magma. Only some parts of the handles were exposed. Xiaohua and Jiang Xing had just approached this mountain crevice when they were immediately discovered by the demon race. They saw 5 leopards, each about 30 meters in size, holding weapons as they flew over from the left side of the magma on a demon cloud. The leopard in front was holding a dried fish in its hand and was biting it with all its might. Its sharp fangs flashed with a blood-red color. "Stop!" one of the leopards shouted loudly. "Is this a place where you can come?" Jiang Sheng turned his head to look at Xiaohua and smiled. He flew forward a few steps, cupped his hands, and said, "GG Pai." Xiaohua was stunned and blinked his eyes. He could be considered proficient in the demon language and dragon language, but he actually didn't understand what Jiang Xing was saying. However, since Jiang Xing and Jiang Che had arranged to meet here, and Jiang Xing didn't bring any keepsake, presumably this strange demon language was also what they had agreed on, right? As expected, when the leopard heard Jiang Xing speak, its expression changed slightly. The leopard that was eating the dried fish threw away the dried fish in its hand and flew a few steps closer. It also spoke in a similar demon language, but the speed of its speech was even more hurried. The 2 demons spoke a few words, and then they both stretched out their claws and stuck them together. The claws slightly touched a few times, and the rhythm was also different. Then, the leopard raised its head and looked at Xiaohua. On that sinister and strange leopard face, a trace of a smile was squeezed out. Seeing this, Xiaohua also nodded and returned a smile at him. The leopard raised its hand. It was still that strange demon language, which seemed to mean, please. Jiang Xing transmitted his voice in a low voice. Spiritual Master Xiao, please follow me. But Xiaohua knew that Jiang Xing was being cautious, so he also sent a sound transmission and flew down with Jiang Xing. The other few barbarians also gave way, their faces were also filled with respect. The leopard in front led Xiaohua and Jiang Xing into a cave. The inside of the cave was even hotter than the outside. Several streams of magma seeped in from the four corners of the cave, then flowed through several grooves and fell into a furnace similar to a cauldron. This furnace was square in shape, and strange demon characters were engraved on it. There were many patterns in the demon characters, and those patterns were actually filled with the splendor of the moon and stars. Seeing this, Xiaohua knew that this was a tool used by the demi-human race and couldn't help but take a few more glances at it. However, he could see that there were only some raw materials in the furnaces, presumably still being refined. When he thought about the weapons in the lava outside the cave, Xiaohua lost interest in taking a closer look. The strength of these barbarians was limited, and they could only use the lava to refine weapons. They had no value to him as a reference. Naturally, there were also some barbarians following behind Xiaohua. When they saw Xiaohua looking at the furnace, they frowned and looked at each other with dissatisfaction in their eyes. After passing through this cave, they arrived at an even larger cave. Inside, there were some weapons commonly seen by the sea race, and they seemed to be of good quality. However, Xiaohua's gaze didn't even stop. He directly looked into the cave and saw another deep cave. At this moment, there were several larger barbarians standing in front of the deep cave. The leader of the barbarians walked forward and whispered a few words. Unexpectedly, he also spoke in strange demon characters. The barbarians guarding the deep cave also raised their heads in surprise. They looked at Jiang Xing and then at Xiaohua. After a slight hesitation, they muttered a few words before turning around and entering the deep cave. Xiaohua looked at the dark cave and didn't release his divine sense. He then lowered his head and looked at his feet. Below his feet was a layer of magma that had cooled down. It was ochre red in color, and there were some fire-type yuan qi emitting from it, causing the entire cave to be scorching hot. At this moment, Jiang Xing turned his head and smiled at Xiaohua, as if indicating for Xiaohua to wait a moment. Xiaohua also smiled and nodded. He didn't mind. After a while, the barbarian came out and waved the large black fork in his hand. Go in. Damn it, I finally understood a few words. Xiaohua cursed inwardly as he followed Jiang Xing into the deep cave. The deep cave was indeed large. There was a huge stone table with several strange weapons placed on top of it. At the head of the stone table, there was a barbarian that was over 10 zhang tall sitting coldly on a stone bed. Next to it were several other barbarians with graceful figures. They were probably female and were obediently accompanying it. Next to the stone table, there were also a dozen or so barbarians. They were all staring at Xiaohua and Jiang Xing with fiendish expressions. Ji Gugu. The barbarian opened its mouth and spoke in a difficult demon character. Jiang Xing took a few steps forward and also spoke a few words. Then, the barbarian was slightly stunned, as if it didn't dare to believe it. Similarly, the dozen or so barbarians were also stunned. Some of them even looked at the barbarians that had attracted Xiaohua and Jiang Xing in disbelief. What did you say? The barbarian was a little anxious and finally spoke in a demon character that Xiaohua could understand. I didn't say anything. Jiang Xing turned his head and glanced at Xiaohua. He said coldly, I already said that I am a dragon general of the North Sea Dragon Palace. My subordinates have already surrounded this place. All of you, leave behind the things used to forge weapons and hurry up and get out of here. Otherwise, don't blame me for killing all of you. Don't you think that Taoist Master Xiao? Jiang Sheng's tone was gloomy. The gaze he used to look at Xiaohua was also sharp, and even had a hint of ridicule. Du. Xiaohua listened to Jiang Xing's baffling words and couldn't help but be stunned. Just like those barbarians from before, when he looked at Jiang Xing's gaze again, Xiaohua suddenly understood. After all this fuss, he had been led by the nose by Jiang Xing. There was no Jiang Che in the flowing lightning residence. Even now, Jiang Xing still didn't believe him. Damn it. Without waiting for Xiaohua to say anything, the leader of the barbarians roared angrily and swung his arm. The female barbarians around him were immediately sent flying. The leader of the barbarians pounced toward Xiaohua like a flying mountain. The two claws made a woo-woo whistling sound and instantly slapped in front of Xiaohua's eyes. You're sick. Xiaohua coldly spat out 2 words at Jiang Xing. His left hand waved in midair and the wishful steel staff appeared in his hand. Boom! There was a loud noise and it hit the claws of the barbarians. The claws on the head of the barbarians were very powerful. In the loud noise, a line of sparks appeared. The leader of the barbarians was actually not sent flying by the wishful steel staff. Moreover, the leader of the barbarians actually used the huge force of the wishful steel staff to flash in midair. The thick leopard tail made a woo sound again and swept toward Xiaohua's head. Xiaohua urged his magic power, and the air waves in the nearby space surged. Xiaohua slightly flicked his finger, and a spell was cast. A fist-sized earth shield immediately appeared in front of him. Puff! In the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint, the tail of the flying leopard hit the earth shield. A thick crack appeared on the earth shield, but it didn't shatter. However, the flying leopard's tail drooped down. It was clearly injured by the counterattack of the earth shield. Roar! At this moment, the dozens of barbarians next to the stone table roared and rushed towards Xiaohua and Jiang Xing respectively. Xiaohua did not face them at all. After blocking the attack of the leader of the barbarians, he sneered and urged the fire escape technique. Shua! There was a light sound, but a string of flames was born and his figure disappeared from the distance. The barbarians that rushed towards Xiaohua were startled. They looked at each other and 2 of them turned around and chased out of the deep hole, while the rest rushed towards Jiang Xing. Roar! Xiaohua appeared outside the mountain valley. Hearing the faint dragon roar in the mountain valley, he snorted coldly and flew towards the top of the mountain valley without stopping. Those dozens of barbarians were only in the light-gathering realm and could not be considered as powerful experts. However, the leader of the barbarians had the strength of the Enlightenment Star realm. If Jiang Xing was at his peak, he would be able to put up a fight. As for now, Jiang Xing was already injured, so how could he be a match for these barbarians? However, this had nothing to do with Xiaohua. Xiaohua wanted to help Jiang Xing with good intentions, but he didn't expect that Jiang Xing would make a fool out of him like this. Xiaohua, who looked very reckless, was actually so scheming. It really made Xiaohua's heart cold. Xiaohua's divine sense swept through the bottom of the mountain valley. 2 barbarians led a few weaker ones out. Xiaohua originally wanted to teach these monsters a lesson, but when he saw the scarlet mountain rocks nearby, he sighed. His figure moved, turning into a rainbow and flying into the sky. Then, Xiaohua waved his large sleeve and swept up Yuan, who was standing far away from the mountain rocks, and disappeared in a moment. Where did the Dragon Palace marine soldiers come from? Then, where did that powerful human fly off to? Dozens of barbarians flew up the mountain valley with weapons in hand. Their gazes were all empty. Not only did they not see Xiaohua's figure, the shrimp soldiers and crab generals were also nowhere to be seen. The leader of the barbarians released his divine sense and looked around for a moment. His eyes turned a few times, and he instructed the barbarians behind him, "Go to the Feather Spirit Palace and find out if the second prince of the Dragon Palace wants to go back on his word again. Oh, and while you're at it, see what happened in Feather Spirit Bay recently." Yes. The dozens of barbarians scattered and flew away, disappearing in a moment. The 2 barbarians who had chased after Xiaohua were still not at ease. They once again circled the entire mountain valley before descending into the mountain valley. Xiaohua's figure landed in Feather Spirit Bay. Yuan shook his head, looked left and right, and said with a smile, Taoist, have you finished your business? And, yes, it's already finished. Bring this Xiao to Yao Shi. Xiao Hua nodded, his face not showing any abnormality. Senior, please follow this little one. Seeing that Xiao Hua was so serious about his promise, the fish monster was overjoyed. It carefully flew in front of Xiao Hua, bringing him into the depths of Feather Spirit Bay. While Xiao Hua was flying, he was thinking about how to refine pills for Old Sea Shrimp and the others. At this time, he was not in the mood to be angry about Jiang Xing's distrust. After all, from the beginning to the end, Xiao Hua was helping Jiang Xing with his own wishful thinking. It was normal for Jiang Xing to be suspicious, but Xiao Hua helping others to this extent was indeed a bit shameful. Chapter 3946. Now that he thought about it, ever since Xiao Hua saved Jiang Xing in the Yazi arena, Xiao Hua had never let Jiang Xing see the fight between him and the North Sea Dragon Palace. How could Jiang Xing trust the few names that Xiao Hua mentioned? Even if Xiao Hua escaped with Jiang Xing still saw the fight between Xiao Hua and the North Sea Dragon Palace. If it was Jiang Xing, he could also see it as the North Sea Dragon Palace playing hard to get. Jiang Xing thought that Xiao Hua was bait to capture Jiang Che, Jiang Hong, and the people of the Heavenly Abode River. This was very normal. Since that was the case, what Jiang Xing said to Xiao Hua earlier should also be a test. In other words, Jiang Hong was not captured by the North Sea Dragon Palace. Perhaps it was because of this that Jiang Xing saw the flaw. And it was also because of this flaw that Xiao Hua was relieved. As long as Jiang Hong was fine, the matter of the Heavenly Abode River had nothing to do with Xiao Hua. Especially since Jiang Xing drowned Longevity Town, he deserved to die. Xiao Hua pulled himself away and left without the slightest bit of hesitation. After flying past some shops, Xiao Hua frowned slightly. Everywhere he looked, there were large and small puddles. Some of these puddles were empty, and some of them were floating on the surface of the water. Some of these puddles were filled with filth, and some of them had some members of the sea race floating on them. However, these puddles were emitting an unpleasant odor. This odor was somewhat stinky and rotten. Xiao Hua felt that it was very strange. Looking at the end of the puddles, there were some simple origin arrays. Xiao Hua's eyes could not see through them. Although Yuan was flying in front, his eyes never left Xiao Hua's face. Seeing Xiao Hua frown, he hurriedly smiled and said, "Taoist, this is the place where the sea race like me live. This place is filled with seawater brought in by the Feather Spirit Palace. Normally, it is changed every half a year. If it was the place where the ordinary sea race lived, there would not be an unpleasant smell. However, if it was the place where the old sea shrimp lived, because of their injuries, the seawater would inevitably be contaminated with the smell. The seawater that is changed every half a year does not require sea crystals. If you want to change it normally, you need to pay a lot of sea crystals, so... And no harm." Xiao Hua smiled and said, "This old man will not smell it." Yes, enlightened master. It's not far ahead." Yuan pointed at a place protected by an origin formation in the distance. In fact, there was no need for Yuan to say anything. Outside the formation, Old Shrimp and the other old members of the Sea Clan were already waiting there. Seeing Xiao Hua coming over, all of them had smiles on their faces. After the old members of the Sea Clan entered the formation, the other old members of the Sea Clan welcomed them. "Taoist Xiao, please." Old Sea Shrimp very respectfully invited Xiao Hua to enter the origin formation. In front of Xiao Hua were dozens of old sea creatures with different appearances. Before Xiao Hua even opened his mouth, these old sea creatures all slightly bowed, carefully greeting Xiao Hua with smiling faces. Xiao Hua raised his hand, saluted everyone, and said with a smile, Gentlemen, has General Lu returned?" Old Sea Shrimp hastily walked out, raised his claws and said with a smile, "Old men, don't surround Taoist Xiao. Since Taoist Xiao is already here, he will definitely help us if he can. I still want to let you rest for a while and wait for you to return." "All right." As they spoke, the dozens of old sea race members dispersed. However, they didn't go far, and their gazes were fixed on Xiao Hua. "Taoist Xiao, This way please. Old Sea Shrimp raised his hand and invited Xiao Hua to walk towards the center of the origin formation. The interior of the origin formation was about a few li in size. It looked like an island with seawater all around. There were some trees on the island, and there was actually a pavilion among the trees. Near the pavilion, there were also some clear and melodious chirping sounds of birds. Xiao Hua flew across the seawater and landed on the island. He looked around and said with a smile, "This Yaoshi really lives up to its name." "Indeed," Old Sea Shrimp said with a smile, "this Yaoshi is a famous place to receive guests in Yuling Bay. Many humans like to rest here. When I came over, a few Confucian cultivators had just left this place." General Lu is very considerate. Xiao Hua understood. So this Yaoshi wasn't what he had imagined. It was the place where Old Sea Shrimp and the other sea creatures lived. Walking into the pavilion, there was a stone table, a few jade chairs, and a few small cups placed on top of the stone table. The cups were filled with some light green liquid, and Xiao Hua couldn't tell what it was. "Taoist Xiao, please take a seat." Old Sea Shrimp respectfully invited Xiao Hua to sit down. He raised his hand and picked up a cup and placed it in front of Xiao Hua. "This is Yuling Bay's ice rain liquid. It is produced from the ice spring at the bottom of the North Sea. It is said that it is useful for the cultivation of humans." Sigh, Xiao Hua sighed. He took the cup and said, "Why are you so polite? Presumably, this thing will cost a lot of sea crystals. It is enough for me to know your intentions." Old Sea Shrimp said with a smile, "There is a saying in the human race, no one will blame you for being polite. We are all vulgar sea creatures. We don't understand the etiquette of the hidden immortal continent. Normally, we would only learn it after seeing others do it. As long as Taoist doesn't get tired of it, we will be satisfied." "Forget it." Xiao Hua raised the cup, raised his head and swallowed the ice rain liquid into his mouth. As the ice rain liquid entered his stomach, an ice-cold yuan qi came out from the ice rain liquid and rushed into Xiao Hua's meridians. At the same time, Xiao Hua's body felt refreshed, as if all the pores on his body were about to open. "Not bad," Xiao Hua said with a smile. "Ice rain liquid really lives up to its reputation. If Taoist likes it, then use it all." Old Sea Shrimp hurriedly put the other cups in front of Xiao Hua. "These things are useless to us sea creatures." Xiao Hua bitterly smiled. This ice rain liquid was admittedly not bad, but that was only for ordinary cultivators. The amount of yuan qi within this ice rain liquid was simply insignificant to Xiao Hua. The only thing that could make Xiao Hua praise it was the momentary feeling and nothing more. Looking at Old Sea Shrimp, who was very eager, Xiao Hua waved his hand and received the ice rain liquid. He said with a smile, "I appreciate your intentions. I have no use for this thing now. Let's talk about it later." Good. The Old Sea Shrimp smiled and chatted with Xiao Hua for a while. Xiao Hua also asked about the Feather Spirit Bay with interest. At this time, Xiao Hua knew that the Old Sea Shrimp and the other soldiers of the North Sea Dragon Palace were born in the sea. However, because of the war, they were sent to guard Yuling Bay because of their meritorious service. Yuling Bay was naturally a peaceful place, and there would be no more war. However, after these veterans retired, they could no longer cut through the wind and waves and return to the Northern Sea territory. They could only spend the rest of their lives here. In fact, for these old sea creatures, as long as there was seawater, anywhere was their home. However, they were injured and in pain every day. Usually, it was inevitable that they would think of their former carefree life and miss their former sea. As for Lu, he was just as Xiao Hua thought. He was a loyal sea creature general. When he saw that his subordinates' injuries could not be healed and they were howling every day, he took out the sea crystals he had accumulated to treat their injuries. The sea relics in the shop were also killed by him using sea crystals to invite soldiers he was familiar with. As for Old Sea Shrimp and the other sea creatures, they naturally lived in the puddles that Xiao Hua saw when he walked over. The fishy smell was emitted by the pus and blood on their bodies. "How many sea creatures like you are in Yuling Bay?" Xiao Hua asked with a frown. "At least 100,000. Old Sea Shrimp answered without hesitation. Xiao Hua was puzzled and asked curiously, How come there are so many? Then, why do you all have to live in Yuling Bay? Won't you return to the northern sea? Old Sea Shrimp smiled bitterly and said, Taoist Xiao, you don't know. However, before he could explain, a sharp voice called out from afar, Taoist Xiao, have you returned? Taoist Xiao, have you returned? Then, a Yuan Shin hurriedly swept over and landed on Xiao Hua. The voice sounded again, quick, Taoist Xiao, Lu has encountered trouble in the flowing merchant union. Xiao Hua stared blankly. He didn't understand why Lu had encountered trouble in the flowing merchant union and why Drip was looking for him. However, he didn't hesitate. His figure turned into a rainbow and flew to the sea where the Yuan Shun formation was and said, quick, let's go. On the way, Drip told him what had happened. In fact, it wasn't a big deal. Today, there was a small auction in the flowing merchant union that was similar to the Yazi auction house. After participating, Lu came across a beast skin and bevan that had a pill formula recorded. Coincidentally, the Apricot Forest Medicine Shop also participated in this auction. The Apricot Forest Medicine Shop was determined to get the beast skin and bevan. Of course, Lu wouldn't give in. The two sides started to bid and the beast skin and bevan reached an extremely high price. The Apricot Forest Medicine Shop obviously didn't believe that Lu could take out so many sea crystals. Therefore, they took out their Qinkuan bag and asked for the sea crystals immediately after bidding. This was contrary to the auction rules of the Flowing Merchant Union, so the Flowing Merchant Union didn't agree. However, the Flowing Merchant Union reminded Lu that if he couldn't take out so many sea crystals after the auction, not only would the beast skin and bevan belong to the Apricot Forest Medicine Shop, Lu would also have to pay a large amount of sea crystals to the Apricot Forest Medicine Shop. Of course, Lu didn't have so many sea crystals. He hurriedly asked Drip to come back and find Old Sea Shrimp and the others to raise the sea crystals. Drip was well aware of how many sea crystals Old Sea Shrimp and the other sea tribes had. She knew that these sea tribes definitely wouldn't be able to gather so many sea crystals. Therefore, she went to find Xiao Hua as soon as she entered the Yuan Shen formation. After all, the human race Dao cultivators who could participate in the Yazi auction house would definitely have sea crystals in their Qiankuan bags. After hearing Drip's explanation, Xiao Hua's heart was also relieved. After he asked about the price of the beast skin and bevan, his heart was completely at ease. He smiled and said, "You don't have to worry about the price. Even if it was 10 times more expensive, this old man can still take it out." That's good, that's good. Drip was actually a little panicked. Now that she heard it, she was really grateful and said, "Taoist master, this matter? Originally, we sea tribes had to deal with it properly, but I didn't expect that Taoist master would have to take out the sea crystals. This one doesn't know what to say." Xiao Hua waved his hand and said, "My human race has a saying, send Buddha to the Western paradise, send people to their home. Since this old man has the spare energy, this old man will do it alone. But we are monster race." Drip wouldn't say this sentence normally, but facing such a compassionate Taoist master Xiao, Drip admired him from the bottom of her heart and couldn't help but say it. Chapter 3947. If the human race doesn't have humanity, then what's the difference between them and beasts? If the demon race has a human heart, then what's the difference between them and the human race? Xiao Hua replied with a smile. AI. Drop sighed in shame. Back then, I also devoured a lot of humans. Now that I think about it, lay down the butcher's knife and become a Buddha. As long as you start today. Xiao Hua replied indifferently. Dee nodded slightly and pointed to a cave in the stone wall in front of her and said, "Here it is." Xiao Hua looked at the cave. It was similar to the Yazi auction house, but the scale was a lot smaller. Even the words, Continuous Merchant Union, above the cave was a lot inferior. Xiao Hua and Drop landed. Drop took out a palm-sized jade tablet and handed it to the demon race guarding the cave, then pointed at Xiao Hua and said, "This is the honored guest of my general. He heard that the Continuous Merchant Union has the rare treasure of the 1,000 Demons' sacred realm. He was very happy and specially came to take a look." The demon race of the Continuous Merchant Union checked the jade tablet and returned it to Drop, then bowed and said, Immortal friend, please, not bad. Xiao Hua followed Drop into the cave and said with a smile, the guards of this continuous merchant union are much better than the Yazzie auction house. Moreover, they actually let us in during the auction. Hee hee, Drop covered his mouth and said, it's just some superficial words. The continuous merchant union already knew that I went out to look for sea crystals. Of course, the Luo-E Merchant Alliance is much better than the Yazzie auction. Although the scale is small, they treat all the members of the Sea clan equally. Just as Qi said this, a voice sounded from inside, fellow immortal, the entire auction is over. I've been waiting for you for the time it takes to brew a cup of tea. The other immortal friends also accompanied me and waited for you. If you can't take out 100,000 sea crystals, then just say it directly. What are you pretending for? In fact, although I am a human, I am also a person with a reputation in the Yuling Bay. I also know a little about what you are like. It is impossible for you to take out 100,000 sea crystals. For the sake of the continuous merchant union's face, and for the sake of immortal friend, I have patiently waited for so long. If we were in the hidden immortal continent, I would have already become hostile. Sai, forget it. You probably can't take out 10,000 sea crystals anyway. You might as well take out 5,000. My apricot forest medicine store has been taken care of by the immortals of the Sea clan in Yuling Bay, and the Luo Merchant Union has been good to us as well. My apricot forest medicine store will bid for the pill formula and bay when at the price of 100,000 sea crystals. Even though Xinglin Drugstore's words were arrogant, they were reasonable. Lu did not know how to respond. Xiao Hua's figure flew into the auction house and laughed brightly. Who said that General Lu doesn't have sea crystals? Spiritual Master Xiao? Xiao Hua's figure still hadn't appeared, but the crowd of sea race and human race in the auction hall all turned their heads in surprise, wanting to see who had arrived. At the same time, a voice that Xiao Hua was very familiar with called out in astonishment. Moreover, Xiao Hua understood that this voice was definitely not Lu's. When Xiao Hua's gaze followed the voice, he couldn't help but be amused. It turned out that the one standing in the middle of the auction wasn't another demon, but the demon clan's Ingpa whom Xiao Hua had met before. Needless to say, the Luo-E Merchant Union must be related to Ingpo's clansmen. Xiao Hua landed in front of everyone's gaze and looked around the auction hall. This auction hall was only a few hundred feet in size and looked rather simple. There were some demon clan and human race sitting in a few simple origin arrays. However, these humans and demon clan didn't cover their faces. The shock on everyone's faces fell into Xiao Hua's eyes. Xiao Hua slightly nodded towards Ingpe and walked to Lu's side. He took out a Qiankuan pouch from his Taoist robe and handed it to Lu. General Lu, this is your sea crystal. Alright. Lu took the sea crystal with a grateful expression like Lu's. Spiritual Master Xiao? Across from Lu, a handsome Confucian scholar held a folding fan in his hand. He frowned and said, this one is Zhang Yong of Yu Province's Nanyang Zhang clan. Greetings to Spiritual Master Xiao. Even though this one doesn't know which province Spiritual Master Xiao is in charge of, even though our Confucian Tao is different, we are all humans. Why is Spiritual Master Xiao helping the sea race? If this matter were to spread to the hidden immortal continent, Spiritual Master Xiao and Spiritual Master Zhao's country would have a bad reputation, right? You province's Nanyang Zhang clan? Xiao Hua slightly pondered and immediately realized. Isn't medical saint Zhang Zhongjing from Yu Province's Nanyang Zhang clan? This Zhang Yong is naturally the descendant of medical saint. Xiao Hua hurriedly raised his hand and said, so it's medical saint Zhang Zhongjing's descendant. This one has been disrespectful. That's all because of my ancestors' great reputation. My ancestors' medical skills have long been lost in the hands of us juniors. This one is ashamed. Zhang Yong saw that Xiao Hua knew his clan's reputation and was slightly proud. He kept his folding fan and cupped his hands. Even though he didn't say anything, his smile already revealed a kind of victory in his hands. He knew that Xiao Hua had to give Zhang clan face. Spiritual Master. Lu also understood and said with a bitter smile, since that's the case, there's no need to make things difficult for Spiritual Master. This one doesn't want these things. However, without waiting for Xiaohua to speak, Ying Po in the distance smiled and said, "So General Lu is acquainted with spiritual master Xiao. Why didn't you say so earlier?" "Sorry, fellow immortal Zhang, my Luo Yi Merchant Alliance won't be bidding for this item." Zhang Yong and all the other humans and demons in the auction house were stunned. Zhang Yong shouted, "Fellow immortal, if this item wasn't taken out, then it's fine. But now that the auction is over, you're saying that you won't be bidding. Where's the credibility of your Luo Yi Merchant Alliance? In the future, who will come to the Luo Yi Merchant Alliance to bid for things? Your Luo Yi Merchant Alliance can't compare to Yazi Auction House and Zhai Xinglu. With this matter, I'm afraid that in the future, there won't be any humans or even demons coming to the Luo Yi Merchant Alliance to bid for things, right?" "Hee, fellow immortal, you don't have to be like this." Xiaohua smiled and raised his hand, saying, "This one knows that the auction house should let people take a look at the items before bidding, right? This one hasn't seen this item before. Fellow immortal, can you let this one take a look?" Of course, Ying Po originally wanted to give this item to Xiaohua. Hearing Xiaohua's words, he naturally raised his hand and waved the beast's skin and Beiwen. The two items landed in front of Xiaohua. Xiaohua took the beast's skin and Beiwen. When he turned around, the beast's skin shook slightly and instantly kept it into the space. He then handed Beiwen to Lu Dao. "General Lu, this one doesn't have any elemental thoughts. I'm afraid I can't take a look." Lu didn't know what Xiaohua was planning to do. After taking Beiwen, he heard Xiaohua's voice transmission. The corner of his eyes twitched a few times. He activated his elemental thoughts and pretended to look at Beiwen. He said, "Where's the beast's skin? Let this one take a look again." At this moment, Xiaohua gave the beast's skin to Lu and returned Beiwen to Xiaohua. Xiaohua took Beiwen and kept it into the space. Lu looked at the beast's skin and pondered for a moment. He nodded and said, "Taoist Xiao, these two items are indeed what this one wants. Sigh, if it was someone else, then so be it." Xiaohua reached out and took the beast's skin. Beiwen also appeared in his hand. He then sighed and said, "But Yuzhou's Nanyang's Zhang clan is the descendant of the medical saint. This item, it's better to give it to them." "Alright." Lu hesitated for a moment and replied, "But 5,000 sea crystals? We still have to compensate Xinglin drugstore." Xiaohua said without hesitation, "If we didn't interfere, how could Xinglin drugstore spend so many sea crystals? But just for this, we still have to compensate them with 5,000 sea crystals." Lu replied. He took out 5,000 sea crystals from his Qiankuan bracelet. Xiaohua took it and gave it to Zhang Yong along with the beast's skin and Beiwen. This happiness came too suddenly. Zhang Yong was caught unprepared. But looking at the beast's skin and Beiwen, Zhang Yong clenched his teeth. Buying these two items for 95,000 sea crystals was indeed not worth it. He originally wanted to take Lu's sea crystals and then bargain with Luo Yi Business Alliance. But Xiaohua was so generous that he couldn't open his mouth anymore. Zhang Yong could only take the two items. He took out a Qiankuan bag from his bosom and gave it to Ying Po along with the 5,000 sea crystals. He smiled bitterly and said, "Taoist friend, here is 75,000 sea crystals. As for the remaining 20,000 sea crystals, when this one returns to Xinglin drugstore, I will immediately send someone to deliver it." "Hee, no problem, no problem." Ying Po took the Qiankuan bag and said with a smile, "This one believes in Xinglin drugstore's reputation." "Good." Zhang Yong nodded. He then cupped his hands towards Xiaohua and said, "Many thanks, Taoist friend Xiao. If you have time, come to this one's Xinglin drugstore. This one will welcome you with open arms." "No problem." Xiaohua replied with a smile, "If I have time, this one will definitely pay a visit." "Fellow Taoists." Ying Po raised his hand and said, "This auction ends here. Fellow Taoists, please come again next time." The group of demons and humans all left. Ying Po sealed the entrance of the auction hall. He turned around and bowed, "Greetings, Taoist Xiao. Rise." Xiaohua helped Ying Po up and said with a smile, "It has been several decades since we parted on Yaotai Mountain. fellow Taoist, how have you been? It is all thanks to fellow Taoist. Ingpa said with a smile, with fellow Taoist's primeval stones, this one and my clansmen were able to open this Luo E merchant union. Our lives have been passable. Ha, fellow Taoist's words are becoming more and more like my human race. Xiao Hua laughed loudly. Ingpa looked at Lu Heli and said with a smile, Taoist Xiao, can you come with this one for a chat? Of course. Xiao Hua nodded. He then said to Lu Heli, you all can go back first. This one will go back in a moment. Yes, Taoist. Lu Heli replied. He took out the Qinquan bag and was about to return it to Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua said with a smile, this one arbitrarily made you lose 5,000 sea crystals. The primeval stones in the bag can be considered as compensation. Ingpa smiled and took out 5,000 sea crystals from Zhang Yong's Qinquan ring. He handed it to Lu and said, wool comes from a sheep's back. Fellow Taoist allowed this one to earn 80,000 sea crystals. Take these 5,000 sea crystals as my thanks. This. Lu was at a loss. Beside him, Lu Heli said, since Taoist Xiao is very close with the Luo E Merchant Union, you can take it. Thank you, fellow Taoist. Lu took the sea crystals and returned the Qinquan bag to Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua did not say anything. He took the Qinquan bag and watched as the two sea race flew out of the auction hall. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.